Everybody, welcome. It's 7 o'clock. I'll call the meeting of the Friendship Heights Village Council to order. And for those who are online, welcome as well. Julian, the audio is working and the system's good? Great. So why don't we introduce ourselves. Councilman R., you want to start so people can recognize our voices?
Daniel R.
Martha Solt.
Melanie White.
Bobby Pestronk.
Cheryl Tyler.
Michael Measy.
Roy Schaefer.
Great, thank you all very much. I have some chair's announcements this evening. First, to all those here, to all those watching, and to all those who might watch between now and the end of the month, I want to wish everybody a happy holiday. There are a number of holidays this month, Christmas and Hanukkah and Kwanzaa, but as I looked through to see what else might happen this month, there's also Bodhi Day, and there is the feast day of Our Lady Guadalupe, and there's also Yule, which is celebrated by Wiccans. So there's lots of stuff going on in December, but to all of you, whether you celebrate or not, during the season, happy holidays. And I hope that they are safe and healthy as well. Second, last month I described the circumstances related to toilets that were flushing directly into the Willett branch of the creek coming out of downtown Bethesda. And there was some question about what the source of that was, and it turns out it was at the Hyatt Hotel in downtown Bethesda, and there were several guest room toilets, apparently at least 3, that were cross-connected directly into the creek, and accounting perhaps for the high levels of fecal bacteria in the creek. I'm happy to say that after a little bit of discussion among certain parties, the Hyatt has disconnected and corrected the effluent from those toilets, and so it will no longer go into the creek, and we'll have a little empirical study, I suspect, this spring and summer and fall when the testing in the creek continues about whether that has cut down on the levels, but it certainly was one source of contamination. So I think that's very good news for all of us who have children and grandchildren who may play and fish in the creek, but also I think for one of the nonprofits that many of us have been involved in, which is the Alliance that has paid close attention to the creek over time and was castigated at some points for the results of its studies. Good news for them and for those who test the creek as well. Third, I was notified about a meeting that occurred last week, put on by the Maryland Municipal League. It's an organization that the village is a member of. And I have talked with Councilman Measy on a couple of occasions about the league and about, at one point he asked for issues that he might raise with the league that might be of interest to us as a village. And it turned out that there were 2 that seemed to be relevant. One was that despite being a dues-paying member of the Maryland Municipal League for however many years we have been a member, it turns out that the bylaws prohibit anyone from the village of Friendship Heights or any special taxing district from rising to officership at the league. And one of the issues that we've raised with the league is not why that is, but more importantly, can the governance committee of the league change that? And so that was one issue that's been raised with the league, and it came up, I brought it up at the meeting last week in Annapolis and was told by the executive director of the league how to approach getting that changed. And so both Julian and I have sent an email to them requesting that it be changed. There was an immediate response, which was a little bit of a non-response, but Julian has followed up with them to make certain that what we're asking for is what will be proposed to the league itself at the governance committee. And the second is a long-standing issue also with respect to special taxing districts. It turns out that special taxing districts, through typical Maryland legislation and also federal legislation, are not eligible for federal and state money that is distributed throughout the state. We're not a municipality. It's a problem for that reason and for some other reasons. And so I had a chance to talk with a member of the Senate, which is the Maryland Senate Budget Committee, about that, and also had a chance to talk with Teresa Coons, who is the executive director of the Maryland Municipal League. And this is an issue that Councilman Measy has talked with them about also, so I want to give him credit for bringing it up. I was able to reinforce it at the meeting, and both the village manager and I have sent a note off to the Senator McCrory, who was there at the meeting, and Councilman Measy has also talked with Senator Corman, the Maryland legislature, to try and be certain that as the bills come through the Maryland legislature, they specifically reference the ability for special taxing districts to be funded. So that was a very productive meeting, I think, for a number of reasons. Fourth, I wanted to mention something I mentioned at the last meeting, but this is an update for Willard Avenue Neighborhood Park, which are those who are interested in a little exercise and fellowship. December 14th in Willard Avenue Neighborhood Park, there'll be another opportunity to cut down invasive non-native species. If you've had a chance to walk down there, I think it's really interesting. It is, at least was for me, to see what it looks like when the non-native species are removed. It looks like what woods should look like now, rather than simply being a place where everything's overgrown. So all the tools are provided. The executive director of the Watershed Alliance is a certified weed whacker, so she's able to direct those who participate to cut down only the things that should be cut down. And since this is a park that many village residents use, it really makes a difference. So December 14th at 10 o'clock, 10 to 12 is when it usually goes, but if you want to stay less time, want to stay a little more time, either of those is possible. And then fifth, you might hear a little bit more about this later in the meeting, but I wanted to thank the village manager, and I also want to thank Council Member Solt, because at the Parks and Grounds Committee meeting, we did concur that we should replace the yews, the low bushes that are in the circle around the park here at Humphrey Park, with native species. There were 36 yews that were dead, and we identified a native species of yews, which over time can replace the non-native species. And I point out Councilmember Solt because she was helpful at the meeting to talk about the discussions that had taken place at the Climate Change and Environment Committee with respect to making sure over time that we have native species. So with that, let me turn it over to comments from the public, and let's see who's got comments to make. Thanks, Jason. I have two people. Is there anyone else here who wanted to make comments besides the two people who have signed up? If not, we'll have those two people and then move on. Al Muller, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and council members. A quick answer to your question, or addition to your question about the special tax district. It doesn't also get funds for a lot of things like cable television. So Julian has a list of all the things we can't get because of that anachronism. I'd like to start with something I think positive for the season, and that is how nice Humphrey Park looks. The lights sort of honor past councils as well as all the holidays that the chairman announced, and you'll notice that the inside of the community center is also not finished, but it's half done with the decoration from the contractor that we've had for so many years. So there are lights and Santa Clauses and fake trees and all sorts of fun things. Also, I neglected to mention and thank the people both on the council and the staff who put those banners throughout the park, and they illustrate all the things that are done in this center. And it's a nice remembrance of all the work that goes into it by our staff. Following that, I would like to present, since I know tongue-in-cheek, our treasurer is not going to give, if he follows his protocol, a positive treasurer's report. So let me report something interesting. In September, the village had in its reserve $3,038,648. By 1 month later, by the end of October, it had accumulated $400,000 more and had $3,401,923. And by the end of this last month, it had accumulated another $400,000. So there presently are in our reserves $3,807,270. In addition, the income tax, which our treasurer was concerned might be dwindling for various reasons, has actually now running $226,732 ahead of budgeting, and we just got an unexpectedly large allotment of income tax. In addition, we are still expecting by early May, thanks to the efforts of Councilman Measy, $1 million check from the 5500. I urge all our residents who are listening to look at those facts and see what a good situation this village is in as far as its finances. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Roger Caccetti?
In connection with the launch of the Friendship Heights development plan, I've had an opportunity to spend some time with the county planning staff, and I wanted to flag two areas where I find myself at odds with what I would describe as the orthodoxy of the planning office and much of the county bureaucracy and a certain amount of the planning community, and suggest that you as council members should make up your mind yourself on both of these and not get caught into some web of orthodox planning jargon. The first is the concept of whether a condominium should be classified as in the same category as an Amazon warehouse, or whether it should be classified as single-family dwellings that happen to be vertically arrayed. In other words, the county offers tremendous benefits for people who live in what are called single-family dwellings, and what I would describe as tremendous punishments for people who live in buildings that are classified as single-family, multifamily dwellings, but which I would call single-family dwellings that are vertically arrayed. The array of the single-family dwelling should not fundamentally change the county's assessment of energy or any other requirements, and yet it does. So this runs counter to orthodoxy. The orthodoxy in planning is that if it's a condominium and then it's multifamily dwelling and it's classified as an Amazon warehouse for human beings. Second issue is, again, in bringing this one up, I want to point out that it's not unanimously held view, but the planning department and the planning community in general is caught in this orthodoxy of increased population density. It's the solution to everything. Increased population density will save the world and blah, blah, blah. In fact, the technology community does not subscribe to that. The technology community's attitude towards global warming is that a combination of tiny houses and electronic vehicles will solve population issues and global climate change issues. Secondly, the demographic community does not agree with that. The population of the United States is declining. The population of Maryland is declining. The population of Montgomery County is declining. The population of Friendship Heights is declining. Our life expectancy is slowly decreasing, for reasons we can discuss, and our birth rates are noticeably decreasing. The only reason we have a nominal increase in population is immigration, and that is a policy decision, not a natural event. As we know, the next president of the United States says he's going to reverse that policy. So the presumption that population growth and global warming can only be addressed through increased population density, while it is orthodox thinking in the planning department and in much of the planning community, it is not widely held or not universally held, and neither of these serve the interests of the people who live here. So if you're looking out for the people who live in Friendship Heights, you should be fully comfortable walking a different path than what the planning department will tell you. Thanks.
Thank you. Seeing that there were no others who wished to speak, I'll move on to comments from the council. Are there any? Yes. Councilwoman Tyler.
I have two. One is a question for clarity. Back to the MML, and understanding what you said, I just want to make sure I understood it. So if we're paying as paid members, those paid members are not to have an elected position, then who are supposed to have the elected position?
The other people who are classified as municipalities in MML.
And that's it.
Yes, that's it.
Okay, well, that'll be interesting to see how that comes out.
Yeah.
The other thing is, in just what Roger is talking about, it's interesting. I don't know if you read the article in Sunday's paper about the sprawl versus living in urban density. And it was a big article about it, a very interesting article on Washington Post. And it talked about totally what you're saying, but emphasized that, yes, people thought that they would move to the city because they could do walking distance to go to the grocery store, to do this all within 10, 15 minutes and blah, blah, blah. And they had a couple who was highlighted that moved from somewhere out of the country and moved here and thought that their life would be better because wherever they lived, they had to drive and they hated driving and all of that. But then they lived in Arlington, in downtown Arlington, where they lived in a high-rise and condominium, and they could walk to their restaurants, to their grocery stores, and they said, in fact, they hated it. They wanted to go to the sprawl. And so now there's this big debate now as to what happens when you do go to the sprawl and move out to suburbia America. Yes, there's more space. Yes, there's more land. But the cost factors is what is kicked in to go against the sprawl, which is gasoline for the car, electric for the car, grocery stores are not close, you can't walk to the pharmacy, all of the opposites. And they said there's a big increase for people wanting space. It was a really interesting article based on what you're just talking about.
Yeah, we're not going to, thanks. We're not going to get, Roger, we're not going to get in a conversation. Thanks. Let me see whether there are other council members who have any comments to make. Yes, Council Member Salt.
I just want to remind folks I'm the secretary, and in order to get a clear record of what occurs, I'm going to be asking for roll call votes. And I mean, there are not so many people today, but sometimes it gets a little noisy, so if you could remember to turn your microphone on so I can actually hear. And if I can't hear, forgive me for asking for a repeat.
I will recognize at the times your request for that. Thanks. Any other comments from council members? Seeing none, Mayor White, your announcements.
Thank you. The village is collecting non-perishable food for Manna Food Center for the holiday food drive through Wednesday, December 11th. You can drop your food off at the table in the village center lobby or in the box on the portico outside the auditorium. The village will be hosting 4 Goodwill donation drives in 2025, beginning Saturday, March 15th. Goodwill will be collecting household electronics, clothing, housewares, and more. The dates will be posted on our website.
Thank you. That moves us on to the approval of minutes. We have 3 sets of minutes. It might be useful to take them one at a time, given the nature of them. So is there a motion to adopt the corrected public session
Yes.
minutes?
I move to adopt the revised minutes of 10/15/2024 council meeting.
Is there support for that motion? Yes. Thank you. Councilman R.
And roll call, please.
What, not yet?
Oh, I'm
Excuse me,
sorry.
That's my responsibility. Thank you very much. I would like to suggest an amendment to those minutes. If you look at the page 2, there is an empty bullet. And that might suggest to people that something was omitted, and I don't think that's the case. It's on page 2 of the October 15th, 2024 minutes. At the top, you'll see 5 bullets, and then dented out to the left, there's an empty bullet. So I'd just like to suggest that that empty bullet be removed. So I'm happy to make the motion to amend. Is there support for that motion to amend? Yes.
Can I
okay.
ask, is it really necessary for just like a punctuation thing?
The reason why we actually postponed the adoption of these amendments, it was because something was omitted
Okay.
from them, and the suggestion was
Fine.
that people might misunderstand what had been done. So this is also to prevent that same misunderstanding. So on the motion to amend, it's been moved by me and supported by Councilmember
Measy.
Measy.
Okay.
So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Hearing none, the motion carries. Are we okay
Yes.
with that?
I'd like to proceed with the roll call.
Okay.
Councilmember R.
Yes.
R, yes. Mr. Measy? Mr. Measy, yes. Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer, yes. Sold, yes. Ms. Tyler? Tyler, yes. White?
Yes.
White, yes. Pestrunk?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Um,
And,
We now have the closed council meeting minutes of November 12th, and these were to obtain legal advice from legal counsel on Page Park project issues. Is there a motion to adopt?
yes, I make the motion to adopt
Okay.
the minutes of the 11/12/2024 open council meeting.
Is there support for that motion? Councilmember Measy, thank you. Is there any discussion about that? Yes, Councilmember Tyler.
You have the same situation on page 2 with the bullet and nothing's there. Mhm. Page 2.
I'm sorry, I don't see it, but
That's the closed meeting. Yeah.
Oh, well, there's a bullet there. You want that gone?
Is there one?
that's what I'm looking at, too.
No, that's on page 3 of the...
For the minutes.
Oh, I see. It's page 3, right here.
Page 3,
Was that the next council meeting?
November
That's the
12th.
next council
Okay,
meeting. Okay.
okay,
And I made
So,
a motion for the open.
There was a motion by
that's fine.
Councilmember Solt, supported by Councilmember Measy, to adopt the closed council meeting minutes of November 12th. Is there any,
I'm sorry, I made the motion on the open meeting, so just bear with me a second. And where did I put that? So this is the open meeting?
No, we're doing
Close
we
meeting.
voted on the open. Not October, we're voting, we voted on the corrected public session minutes of the October 15th council meeting. The vote was 7-0, if my count is correct, so the motion passed. And now there's been a motion by Council Member Solt, supported by Council Member Measy, on the closed council meeting minutes of November 12th. So,
Okay.
is there any further discussion?
I'm sorry, I was just getting my notes correct, so
Okay,
I'm sorry.
thank you.
Mhm, mhm.
Important that the minute taker have clarity. So, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. None. Motion carries. Moving on to the public session minutes.
And if I could proceed with the roll call here on this one.
Sure.
Mr. R, please.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Measy? Measy, yes. Schaefer?
Yes.
Schaefer, yes. Me, yes. Tyler? Yes. White?
Yes.
Yes. And Pestrunk?
Abstain.
Abstain. Thank you.
Moving on to the public session minutes of the November 12th council meeting. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
Yes, I move to adopt the minutes of the November 12th,
Thank you.
2024.
Councilmember Stolt, is there support for that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Mayor White. Is there any discussion? Yes. Okay, so, Council Member Solt, would you?
Yeah, I accept
You accept the motion?
amendment.
Amendment?
Yes.
Yeah, okay,
mhm.
we don't have to vote on that then. And Mayor White, are you okay with that too, since you, okay. So we've got a motion from Councilmember Solt and support from Mayor White to adopt the public session minutes of the November 12th council meeting with the removal of the one bullet, the orphan bullet there. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Can I proceed?
Yes.
Mr. R?
Yes.
R4, Measy? Measy 4, Schaefer?
Yes.
Schaefer 4, Solt 4, Tyler?
Yes.
4, White?
Yes.
4, Pestrunk?
Abstain.
Abstain. Thank you.
Thank you. That moves us on to the treasurer's report. Councilmember Schaefer?
Okay, thank you. So thank you, everyone, for joining us and giving us your time. Let me just say that it's my responsibility to give an accurate report, an honest report, to tell you what I think is going on, to respond to questions that I get, and the suggestion that it's the treasurer's responsibility to exclusively give a positive report it's an unfortunate misunderstanding of the role of the treasurer. So with that said, let me just say there's not a lot for me to report this month, which makes it a great opportunity for the chairman to allow people joining us to ask questions and make comments about the things I talk about. It would not add to my allotted time. Two things I want to talk about. First is the additional expenses for Page Park. If you've been coming to these meetings, you know that we've already publicly approved expenses for two items. The first was a $4,000 invoice for engineering expenses. We approved a stormwater contract for $32,000, and at this point we are pretty much going ahead and picking up all the expenses and laying them out. We don't know what that final cost will be. It's probably, including the things I mentioned, I would estimate maybe around $60,000 minimum. The ceiling, depending on what the studies we've yet to do determine, it's just impossible to know where we may wind up. So I just wanted to make people aware of that. Okay, and the other thing is we are starting the budget process next month. We have a confirmed date on the calendar for a Finance Committee meeting for Thursday, February 27th at 6 p.m. We're close to confirming a date for Thursday, January 9th at 6 p.m. That's pending staff availability. Both of those meetings would be in person and here at the Village Center. We have some preliminary tax information. We have 4 sort of tax revenue items in our budget. For 3 of those, property, and Julian, correct me if I get this wrong. For the property taxes, municipal tax rebates, and highway taxes, it looks like the total projected taxes for those 3 items will be flat. And by flat, I mean within probably 1% up or down. Those 3 items are a little under a third of our projected revenue. The 4th piece, which is the biggest piece, it's just over 50% of our budgeted revenue. We're going to find that out in a couple of days. The comments that referred to the big influx of taxes, this year so far, the taxes are running ahead of what is projected in our budget. It may be a timing difference, it may not. So we don't know, but that's what I'm referring to. The number we're going to get is for next year. I expect it's going to be pretty much also in line with this year. So all those tax items are a little over 80% of our budget. The last big piece is parking ticket revenue. That's about 10%. That is running below what we budgeted. So I think overall, and again, these numbers are not set, probably flat projected revenue for next year. And as I've mentioned a couple of times, this is for everybody listening and also for council members. We're in the process of preparing a draft budget, so if anybody has any suggestions, new expenses, deleting expenses, increasing expenses, cutting expenses, please send those to me. And I will look at those and try to incorporate those into our first budget draft, which we will have for the meeting on January 9th, assuming the January 9th meeting gets confirmed. Just want to remind people I have office hours by appointment if you'd like to meet, and if it's allowed, I'd like to take questions or hear comments. Thank you.
No, thanks. Thank you for your report, Councilmember Schaefer. Are there questions for the treasurer about the report? I have a few that I'd like to ask. I wondered about the artists and the Montgomery County Police Office house and whether that should be shown as a fixed asset for the village on our statements. It isn't. I don't believe it's shown right now. I believe the only thing that's on there is the red house.
Yeah, I've asked that, and how long have we owned that other house?
1985.
Yeah, so because I've asked that question, that's a good question, and what I think happened is we've probably fully depreciated it at this point, which would mean we wouldn't show it as an asset, but we can certainly take that up with our accountant.
Okay, great. I think that you just reflected on this, but I just wanted to ask the question specifically. Do you anticipate a surplus of revenue over expenditures for the fiscal year 25 budget, the year that we're in right now?
Well, it depends how you define surplus. If you are including capital expenses, probably not. But again, a budget is an estimate made more than a year in advance. So we just, what we estimated was just on the operating a break even. So it's really hard to say. I mean, maybe Julian's in a better position than I am.
Village Manager Mansfield, do you have thoughts about that?
The key number is the income tax, and we will find out, as the treasurer said, we'll find out a little more later this week.
I think he was asking about the current year, right?
I'm asking about the current year budget. Do we expect a surplus of revenue over expenditures, even probably accounting for the expenditures for Page Park and for a few other items? Would you expect a surplus of revenue over expenditures in the year we're in?
Well, again, for the current year, it depends on income tax, because the income tax comes in 4 months. Nearly all of our income tax is received in 4 months. It's November, February, May, and June. We've just had the first distribution of this current fiscal year. The first large distribution was November, which, as was noted, is way higher, 564,000. Last year in November, we got 429,000. So typically, the state uses the November distribution as a sort of a projection for the rest of the fiscal year, and they will give those numbers to us later this week. If that holds, then the answer to your question is probably yes, we'll have a surplus of everything. If we're going to get 2 more payments of $564,000 plus another payment in June, we will well exceed the current fiscal year's budget for income tax.
Okay,
But we don't know all of that until we get the information. It could be that it's a one-time windfall in November.
Right.
That does not translate to higher payments for the rest of the year, but we'll see.
Okay, just 1 second. So if it transpires that in this year we do have a surplus of revenue over expenditures, then the fact is that I think 10 out of the last 11 years we will have had a surplus of revenue over expenditures. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Councilman Schaefer?
Well, again, in our budget, we do not show capital expenses. We're showing a piece of our expenses. It may be the majority, but it's not fair to say that, because like I've said many times, most municipalities, if not all, include capital expenses in their budget. And to get back to your question, do we have a surplus? It also depends, are you talking about a cash surplus? Or are you talking, because if we spend $300,000 or whatever the number may be, let's say renovating the Red House, but we depreciate it, well, we spend $300,000 in cash, but from an accounting point of view, we don't have a $300,000 expense. So this is why you can show 5 accountants 5 things and get 5 different answers. But a lot of it depends on how you want to define surplus.
Yeah, and I think that at least one council member has reflected previously on the projections for the year and the budget process and suggested that there are a range of alternatives that are likely scenarios, could be likely scenarios for this year and subsequent years.
Right.
So,
But if you're asking me if we're going to spend more cash this year than we take in, including capital expenses, I would say the answer is yes, notwithstanding the higher check we just got.
yes,
Because I
and
think that is mostly due to
we
a
have
timing
set
difference.
aside money for capital expenditures. I think the
But I'm
finance-
just answering your question.
I know.
Okay.
I know. I'm just reflecting some additional information for people who want to pay attention to the details, that we have set aside money for capital expenditures, thanks to the work of the Finance Committee this year. And it actually, it actually leads me to another question that I have. And it was my recollection that there were at least 2 CDs that were going to expire in the month of October. And if that recollection is correct, I don't recall either the Finance Committee or the Council approving how those expired CDs would subsequently being invested, other than a lengthy conversation at the Council meeting at the time about and at the Finance Committee meeting about not continuing to invest those in CDs with Mr. Kuski because of problems with the paperwork that were associated. And I wondered what the status of the CDs that expired were. And I talked with the village manager to ask before the meeting, and the village manager and the staff of the village, at the recommendation of the treasurer and supported by the council, determined that they didn't want the staff involved in the investment of the CDs any longer, and the responsibility for those CDs was given to the treasurer and the mayor. And I talked with the mayor earlier tonight to ask whether she had seen any paperwork to continue the investment anywhere of the CDs, and she had not. So the question is, one of the reasons why we were so careful about the investment of the CDs was, quite frankly, a suggestion that someone could embezzle the funds. And so there ought to be 2 signatures on anything that had to do with Mr. Kuski, and frankly, we discussed that it shouldn't be reinvested with Mr. Kuski because the paperwork that originally supported that investment was wrong. So I wondered whether you know what the status of those CDs are, the ones that have expired.
Yeah, okay. There's so many mischaracterizations in there. First of all, when you say money's been set aside, it has not. We did put money into an account and call it a capital account, but it's a distinction without a difference because there are no restrictions on how that money could be spent. So the money's not set aside. It was just moved from one pail to another, but it can still be spent for any purpose. So it's a mischaracterization to say it's been set aside. as far as the investment of CDs, there was no problem. That what you refused to sign, and it was not over an issue with the staff being involved in the decisions. The problem was the staff were on the account as the owners of the account, which is not acceptable. It was never an issue of whether or not they could be involved in the decisions. The mayor signed as a signer. I signed as a signer. You refused to sign. The problems were yours and yours alone. So there was no agreement that there was a problem. The way we, there is a CD that just expired. The way we renewed the last CDs is with Melanie's approval, and I kept her in the loop, I spoke to Brian, and we selected a CD. The staff is included in that correspondence, and the mayor was. And I specifically got, Mayor White's approval to move ahead with that, as we are the two signers on the account.
So with respect to could be spent, there's a clear record that the Finance Committee and the Council set aside funds at your request and with approval for capital expenditures, because the conversation at the Finance Committee and at the Council was we may have upcoming capital expenditures and it would be useful to begin to have an account for those. And the decision was made, and the Council supported that decision, not to segregate those funds as might be done in a condominium or some other place, because nobody knew what other emergency expenditures might happen. And so it was segregated. It was shown as segregated. The funds were put in there so that we could begin to think about the way to pay for capital expenditures. So that's what happened with that. And secondly, what happened to the CD that expired?
It was reinvested in another CD. There never was an agreement to pull money out of the account. It's something you wanted, but was never agreed upon.
I don't know that anybody had any information about that, and from conversations with the mayor, I'm not sure that she was fully apprised. Mayor White?
The last email I see, Roy, was around November 21st when you asked Brian about the interest rate.
Why
Was there subsequent emails?
I'd have to check, but I know the last time we reinvested a CD, I did send you an email, and I asked if it was okay to call Brian, and you said yes. And I could send you that email if you'd like it.
That wasn't for the recent CD that
There's one
expired.
that did expire very recently, and I have not, and I've been meaning to send Mayor White an email to reinvest that CD.
Right, okay.
Which is the process we've been following, and again, Mayor White and I did not have problems with the paperwork signing on to that account.
Yeah, so in fact, you proceeded on your own to advise Mr. Kuski that it was okay to reinvest the CD.
No, with the mayor's advice.
The mayor
and
just
consent.
told you that she didn't have an email from you which confirmed what had
No, on
happened the
left-
last time around.
On the left, no, the one that just expired. I can probably pull it up right now where Mayor White said, that's fine, go ahead.
Okay, I think, if my recollection is correct, and this was also at your suggestion, that decisions, and this was back ago, that decisions about the CD were supposed to require 2 signatures.
Which
So
we
that-
have.
Well,
So
I don't,
there is no signature. There were 2 authorized signatures, but the approval process there was no signature required to reinvest the CD. It's a conversation which is with the investment advisor, which is recorded, and which has a very substantial email trail, and the staff is copied on that as well.
yeah, so the reason why, even though authorized by the council, just to be clear, I was authorized to be a signatory on the investment and the release of these CD funds. And when I reviewed the paperwork that had been submitted by Mr. Kuski, the paperwork was wrong. It suggested that we could invest in equities, stocks, and that is not allowable. I refused to sign that paperwork. I brought it to the attention of the treasurer, and I discussed it in the Finance Committee as well. And I didn't make an issue of it at the time because the understanding was the CDs would not go back and be reinvested in a CD with the same paperwork that was an error. Instead, they would be invested in a Maryland state fund, which we have access to and which typically, I don't know what the circumstances were at the time, pays an interest rate which is equal to or greater than interest rates that are available from banks or the private market. It's a very favorable investment term, and it's used by municipalities across the state. So I don't have anything more to say about this other than I don't think the proper procedures were used. I don't think the council or the finance committee was notified, and I think that's a problem.
Okay, can I respond?
Yes, you can.
No, I'm asking Councilmember.
Council.
So first of all, again, a gross mischaracterization. Mayor White, when you did raise all these problems, which I know Mayor White got a legal opinion from our attorney if she should proceed, and without talking about that opinion, it was after consulting with our attorney that we both signed the paperwork, and I'll leave it at that. So if you had problems, that's understandable, but 2 of the 3 authorized signers did not share your concerns, and possibly neither did our attorney, based on the mayor's action after speaking with him. In terms of the municipal fund, it does pay a slightly higher rate, but again, it's a risk versus reward. The investments we make have the highest level of insurance. The Maryland fund you keep referring to is not federally insured the way the CDs are, that we invest in are. In terms of the paperwork not complying with the rules, this is the first time I'm hearing that, but what I can tell you, our investment advisor is well aware of the restrictions, and he has no authority to proceed without getting approval. So there's lots and lots of checks to make sure, even if what you're saying is true, and again, I never heard that, there's a lot of checks that would prevent that from happening.
I disagree that this is the first time you're hearing about it. It was discussed at a finance committee meeting, and I discussed it personally and privately with you as well at the time. Councilman Measy?
I think a lot of old disputes are being aired here, and I don't want people to be confused. How much is the CD? What are we talking about?
I'm not sure, but it's been drawn down quite a bit because we moved a lot of that money into the
What is it?
capital.
It's 685,000 is right now left in the account.
Yeah, but this particular CD
with
that's in
three
this-
Oh,
CDs
it's
as
200.
of
200.
It's under 250.
And-
200-something thousand
And
each.
this money resides where? In the capital improvement account or in our general fund?
Right now, it's in the CD account, and it's in cash until the mayor and I agree on how to.
So that's in the general fund rather than in, it's not.
Well, it's
it's
a
not-
general fund account.
Right,
It's
right.
It's in the CD.
Okay, so
That's it, okay.
I don't want anybody coming to the conclusion that $200,000 of money have disappeared or anything
No,
of
and-
that sort. We have the money, it's in the appropriate account. Can we just move on and have some, and
Yeah,
let the chairman and the treasurer discuss at another point their
This
difference of opinion
This
on
whole
this?
discussion is about reinvesting
Mr. Chairman,
funds.
I'm asking that if we can move on.
Yes, I know that there's at least one comment from another council member. Yes, Councilman Tyler.
I'm glad you asked the question because I was going to ask that too about, bottom line is, yeah, there's a lot of going back and forth here. Is there a report, and if not, will we get a report that shows the CDs? Because I do recall back before any of us were on the council that we did see it written somewhere that showed the CDs and what they were worth. So I would appreciate it if we could have that report reported somewhere so that people do know that the CDs are still around and what they're of their value.
Village Manager Mansfield, is there a financial report that shows the cash for
There-
that CD that expired?
There's a monthly statement that we get from the company's called Cantella. That's Brian Kuski's firm that he uses to do the CDs. So we get the monthly statement because we have to enter the interest for the accounting report that you see. So the latest one we have is October 30th. We have not received the November statement yet.
Okay, so we don't really know where that cash exists right now, if in fact that CD expired. I'm not suggesting there's been any impropriety, but I just was seeking some additional information on what
We
happened.
do know where
Yes.
it exists. It's in the account.
I would just ask that because CDs usually are just like savings accounts, they don't always print every month. Some of them do, some of them don't. However they come out, it would be nice to have it so that people could see something written that says these are the CDs and that as of October, this is what they are.
Thank you. Other comments on the treasurer's report? Councilwoman Salt?
I'm confused by your comment, Bobby, saying, oh, we don't know where those funds are. Is that what you said?
I said I don't see them reflected in our financial statements anywhere.
Okay, but
And as Councilwoman Tyler suggested, it
I
might be
heard her.
useful to have
I heard
them.
her.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, they don't just disappear. When something expires, it stays in that same
They
financial
are reflected in the
institution.
statements, yes.
They're not.
Yes. It's the account. It's not the, we don't get the details of the account. It's like if we give a checking balance, you know, and it's one of the accounts that is listed in, it's not money that's kept in a place you don't get to see it.
Village Manager Mansfield?
It's shown on the balance sheet on the last page of the accounting report.
Item 1, TAC 1161.
Yeah, exactly.
Bank
And it-
CDs,
and it shows-
$685,012.
Right, as of November 30th. So the October statement is the same as the November statement. So
Yeah,
that is shown on the balance sheet.
It's the
Kid, it's
fifth item
labeled-
down under bank accounts.
Bank CDs. That's all I asked for, That's all I asked for, and I think a lot of people just want to know where it is and where it's reflected. Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Councilman Ayer.
Any further discussion? If not, on to the village manager's report. Village Manager Mansfield?
Just one quick item. We did receive some requests from our shuttle bus passengers to add a bus stop, or to see if we could add a bus stop in front of the Amazon store on the days that the bus goes to Westbard, which is Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday. That's a different route than the other days. And currently, we were not stopping in front of the Amazon store on those days. The bus was getting to the Friendship Heights Metro, but not right in front of the Amazon store. So we've had some people ask us for that, and we checked out with our RMA, the bus contractor, and I had a conversation with Patrick, the main bus driver, about how we could do this, and he gave us some helpful input in terms of being able to accommodate it without really changing the overall schedule, tweaking a minute or two here and there. There were a couple of minutes on the return trip from the Westbard Shopping Center that we could reduce that we didn't need on the schedule, so we were able to accommodate this additional stop, and we will be starting that in January, and we will be promoting it, publicizing it in the newsletter, and we want to thank the folks who asked us for this, and we know they'll be happy that we were able to accommodate it.
Thank you. Mayor White and then Council Member Tyler.
And just to reemphasize Julian's point, this new schedule does not remove time from the bus schedule for the folks at Westbard, because I felt that was important. They get maybe 45 minutes, 50 minutes, and I felt like they needed all of that, so it does not change that.
I had one question on the bus stop, and it may have been spoken about, and pardon me if I've asked a redundant question. How did it change? Has it changed for the stop at the Giant store yet? Or are they still parking the bus outside in the front? I know there was time way back, we were talking about under the construction, that they were parking the bus out in the front, and the people would have to walk in further, and later.
Oh, at
they
the
were
west,
being-
at the Westbard Giant, yes, they're able to pull in. Actually, the mayor has more direct experience with this than I do.
Patrick, the last time I rode with Patrick, he did pull into the driveway that stops in front of that one giant entrance with the staircase. Ron, the last time I drove with him, he was pulling up to the permanent bus stop where people can sit and wait for the bus. So I don't have a preference, but I think it depends on the driver. So,
Yes, Councilman Musi.
Just a quick question. Will this change with Amazon? Will that affect any of the other stops on the schedule? Will we have to alter by a couple of minutes either way where?
It's a minor adjustment. There's only 1 minute needed to get from the metro station to the Amazon stop. So it basically bumps up everything by 1 minute
Yeah.
going out to Westbard, and then on the return trip, it's pretty much the same all the way coming back in. So it's just a minor change on the outbound route, but it does not add to the overall number of service hours, or it doesn't change anything with
So
regard to the.
if at a particular building you're expecting the bus at 8:42 in the morning, it's still going to be at 8:42?
It'll be, well, it depends. If you're going to Westbard,
Yeah.
it'll be at 8:43.
Uh-huh.
If you're coming back, it should be the same time.
Should be
That
the
should
same
not be affected.
Okay.
And I guess hopefully, yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm happy to take this offline, but in looking at the contract that I know we're going to be talking about later, I had a question about how we set the route and like mechanisms for entertaining and discussing these changes over time. So I don't know if there's a document or something that you could just point me to, or if you want to have that conversation. I don't need an answer now, but this does remind me that I had that question earlier.
Okay. Village Manager
I
Mansfield?
mean, the short answer is there's not a document about it. It really depends on the substance of the change. Like, for instance, when the council wanted to revise the route and go to Westbard, that was a complete change that required a great deal of coordination and remapping the entire route. But for a relatively minor change, we can typically work it out with the bus company's approval, and adjust the times as needed, as long as it doesn't affect the overall schedule.
Yeah, I was thinking actually a document that memorialized the route we were committing to, that we would be editing over time. If there's a piece of paper that says it shall go from here to there and here and there, other than just the map, or whether that was, we just accomplish that through the route map that gets shared with the community.
Yeah, it's just through in this case, it's just going to be through the schedule. We're going to publish the revised schedule. We're going to publicize that there's this one change, and it won't even affect anybody on the other days of the week stay exactly the same. And the incoming route from Westbard stays the same. So we will just we would highlight the changes, but it will be relatively minor.
Thanks.
I guess also, and Mayor White, I know you've been working hard on this bus contract, that there's meant to be an app that is available to village residents to tell them when the bus is coming, so that they can project the schedule of the bus as well. So.
Yes, and I think I mentioned at last month's meeting, the app is helpful up to a certain point. The WMATA app, which is certainly a lot more sophisticated than probably anything we'll have, sometimes it's completely accurate and sometimes it's off. So I think we're at the stage of bus apps where we have to be realistic.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Village Manager Mansfield, anything else? Okay. Moving on to committee reports. The first one is the report on the Parks and Grounds Committee meeting of November 19th. We did meet. 3 members of the committee were present. We approved the agenda for the meeting. We had a long discussion about the pollinator garden request from the Friendship Heights Business Alliance. We agreed to approve the one-time donation to the Business Alliance contingent upon approval from the village attorney, that we could in fact do that. We approved some minutes for the meeting. We had a Page Park update from the village manager. We talked about the web page that the Communications Committee asked the assistant village manager to construct, and once there is agreement on the content of that web page, the Parks and Grounds Committee agreed to assume responsibility for keeping it updated and also to review articles in the monthly newsletter about Page Park, with the advisory from the assistant village manager that newsletter and its content have a very tight timeline. That needs to be, the review needs to be turned around quickly, and we acknowledged that. We also had a conversation about the restoration of the grass strips, which are between the street and the sidewalks throughout the village. They're particularly visible down North Park on the south side of the street, but they exist elsewhere. There are sections of those grass strips which are not in great shape, and there's a beginning of conversation about how that ground cover might be replaced. Council Member Salt was very helpful at the meeting, reflecting on a conversation that took place within the Environment and Climate Change Committee about the soil within those grass strips, within the space between the street and the sidewalk, that they are heavily contaminated with salt, and if anything major is going to be done to allow things to grow well, we're probably going to be looking at an expense to remove the soil and replace it, and also to see whether buildings within the village are compliant with a request that salt be swept up after it's placed down rather than allowing to continue to drift into those strips. And the village manager agreed that he would consult with the landscaping maintenance company and see whether there's a plan to treat those areas and what kinds of plantings might survive at any rate, because those strips, if you can envision them in your mind, are what people walk across in order to get from their car onto the sidewalk on the same side of the street that cars are parked, and so the areas are trampled as well. We also talked about potential signage for parks throughout the village. I shared with committee members a series of pictures as there's been discussion about Page Park and other parks. As I've visited places around the country, I've taken pictures of signage that are used in those parks in places where they have authority to prohibit or recommend certain behavior, and in places where they don't, since we don't have authority to require certain things to be done. And so that'll be a topic for an agenda at a subsequent meeting. And then we talked about a potential committee charter for the Parks and Grounds Committee meeting. The village bylaws stipulate that the main purpose of each committee should be stated when the committee is founded. They are founded regularly every 2 years as a new council comes in, and there's currently no charter for the Parks and Grounds Committee, so one has been proposed and be subject for a conversation at another meeting. That's it there. Any questions? Yes, Councilman Schaefer.
You just mentioned that the committees are founded every 2 years, so does that mean any charter would expire with the expiration of the council term?
I think it's actually something to be discussed as a potential item for discussion later in the conversation. We're talking about the bylaws as to what the status of something like a charter would be and whether it's worth a review.
Okay.
Yep. Other questions? Report from the Public Safety Committee. Council Member Tyler.
It's not actually a report because we don't have one yet, so it's comments from the Public Safety Committee. One, at our November council's meeting, 2 council members spread allegations about the Montgomery County Police Department off-duty police program and made slanderous statements about one of the council members. The committee will respond to these potentially legally liable allegations in January of 2025. The PSC is, in conjunction with the village manager, have been working diligently for several months with the representatives of the county's insurance program and our respective legal advisors to clarify and understand insurance requirements for the program. And lastly, until the village manager and the Public Safety Committee obtain all necessary, accurate, and proper information from our insurance representatives and legal advisors, the off-duty police program is on a temporary pause. On behalf of the Public Safety Committee, we thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
It's a comment.
Okay. That takes us into old business, and the first item under old business is a discussion and vote on proposals for the Red House improvements and ADA compliance. Councilman R?
Please.
Yes.
Thank you. So before we get into a substantive discussion about the proposals themselves, just want to baseline a few things for the benefit of the council. The first is that we continue to operate on the assumption that the goal for the Red House is to make it an amenity for the village. So the goal is to make it, our going-in position is that it will be a place of public accommodation, which means, and I think we all agreed maybe 2 meetings ago, that all, assuming we move in that direction, all potential tenants will require the majority of the work outlined in this RFP. That is the access accommodations. In order for this to be open to the public, we'll need to do the majority of the work. Most, including the tenant with whom we're currently negotiating, will also need the additional adjustment of a wider rear door to accommodate restaurant-grade utilities, a stove, that type of thing. I think we also agreed a couple of meetings ago that as long as we were embarking on a construction project, pulling permits, engaging a contractor to do the required access work, that it made sense, it was in our interest both financially and as a matter of compliance and convenience to do all of the prospective work at the same time. So that is to include the widening of the back door in the proposal and have a single contractor do all the work to make the building ready for what we expect to be a food service tenant. All that in mind, I will say we are in the process of negotiating. We've traded versions of a lease agreement with the tenant the committee selected several meetings ago. As recently as today, we received some additional advice from our real estate attorney, capturing the outcome of a meeting the ad hoc committee had with her a couple of weeks ago, right before the Thanksgiving holiday. We expect within the next day or so, those comments will go back in a revised version, sort of a counter-proposal to the prospective tenant. The issues are few, although significant, I think, for the village. So important that we provide these handful of alternatives. But the majority of the issues raised or suggestions proposed by the prospective tenant, it was both our and our attorney's estimation were not significant in a way that suggests that we are not moving toward a resolution. So we're optimistic that we are nearing the end of a negotiation with this tenant, but either way, I think we have a strong incentive to get a contractor started on the work required to make this building accessible. And so, although to the extent that anyone is concerned that we're putting the cart before the horse and talking about accommodations before we have a tenant, I think based on all the several conversations and agreements that we as a full council have had over the last several meetings, that in fact moving forward with a contractor and getting this work started is in our interest, regardless of the outcome of this particular landlord-tenant negotiation. Now, I'm happy to talk a little bit about the proposals, but Julian, I thought you did a really good job in summarizing and organizing the materials, so I'm happy to give you the opportunity to share. Oh, sorry.
Yes, 1 second, Councilman.
Before we
Easy?
get to the proposals themselves, I think, Daniel, I appreciate and support the idea of moving forward because as you say, we will need the place, whatever we do with it, we'll need the place up to grade, particularly in regard to ADA concerns. What's your estimation of where we are with this tenant? I heard you say we're close, but there are still significant issues. Do you have a reading about whether this guy is going to stay, or is he going to go? Is he going to throw in the towel here? I mean, we did get other people who wanted to use the place, so I'm not as worried about that. But I'm worried about the sense that we're negotiating with him. He's going to finally walk away, and then we'll have to start all over.
I'm happy to give the rest of the committee the opportunity to share their opinions. My personal opinion is that I was more concerned before we saw this most recent round of edits, mostly because of the time it took to get it back. We gave them quite a bit of time, put a lot of pressure on the broker and their counsel. I was concerned that was going to lead to really significant gap between what we were looking for and what they were coming back with. I think the handful of items that are important to us but I think reasonably negotiable won't be fatal. I think if they're going to walk away, it won't be because of our response or this negotiation. But the fact that we've got a significant construction project ahead of us, and they will have to do some work once we have achieved a certain level of work on our project, we will be able to open the facility to them to start doing their interior work, but that we won't be able to run them fully concurrent, so that will be additional delay on their end, where they're, every month that passes that this isn't open is a financial burden on them to some extent as well. So, yeah, I don't know, Roy or Cheryl, if you have other assessments.
Councilman Schaefer, any? No. Yes, Councilman Tyler.
I agree with Daniel and wholeheartedly. And after our meeting, our recent meeting, and then after what came back to us today, the stress from, if you want to say the real stress, was very much in the beginning, because we took so long to get back to them that they even came back and said, are you still interested? So yes, we do have to get the construction done. I think we have some timelines that we know we probably can live with. We went over those a great deal with the attorney. And as Daniel, Councilman Ayers said, until we get ours done, they can't do anything. So we've got to get ours done in order to get them.
Councilman Schaefer.
Yeah, so I agree. There was, the initial stages, a lot of sort of like, no one sort of was moving quickly. At some point, as Councilmember Orr said, it dawned on me they have not spent any money, and which made me think they might walk away. But now they clearly, if nothing else, have been paying their attorney. So the fact is they are sort of putting their money where their mouth is, and they are starting to incur expenses. So, and the changes on both sides of the revisions have been substantive. Having trouble with that word, but I do think we are probably can work out what the remaining issues are. Thank you.
Let me see, before I turn it over to the village manager, Councilman R, anything else?
No, that's it for me at this point.
Okay, so let's go. Village manager.
So this was, as was mentioned, we brought these proposals several months ago, and they were deferred at the time pending some additional questions raised and some additional information we needed. One of the items was the additional cost to raise the interior porch floor, which was not clear in the original scope of work, and we confirmed that subsequently. So we went back to the bidders and got some additional pricing on that. We also had a range of prices from some of the bidders. We are recommending Managed Homes. Their base bid was actually the lowest of all the 6 bidders, and then when you factor in some of their additional costs and design fees, they have a range of fees, and we chose to just, for comparison purposes, to put them at the top of the fee, the top of their range, to include that in their total. So their total appears to be larger than some of the others, but if those fees come in a little less, they will be pretty much one of the low bid, if not one of the low bids. Tremendous references from them, including from our own broker, Al Charbonneau, who referred us to them originally, and lots of experience at ADA work and consulting with DPS. So we're recommending them. And I should also add the working group, I believe, met with that contractor as well on site, and had a very good feeling about their work.
Yeah, and a number of the recommendations came from food retail. So in addition to familiarity with the ADA compliance and DPS work, they're also familiar with working alongside food restaurants and other food service providers.
Councilman R, have we had any conversations with DPS or other county departments to make sure that as we proceed with this, we're doing what we need to do?
So we, Julian, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have made them aware of our intent to develop this
Yes.
project, but have not yet. So they're aware and awaiting outreach on this, but I don't think we've done any formal. We haven't submitted any specific.
No. We actually had a pre-design. I believe it's called a pre-design consultation. We had that with DPS a year ago.
Right.
Just telling them that we have this house. We are going to proceed with looking for a tenant for it for a food use. So we got the initial meeting with them with the guidance of what had to happen, and their guidance at the time was wait until you have a tenant, and then you have to submit drawings for a building permit, commercial building permit. So that's the procedure. Our contractor has to submit the commercial building permit application. The tenant has to submit for a certificate of use of occupancy and for beer and wine permits. So there's sort of two separate permit tracks that the landlord is doing and the tenant will be doing.
So we're not likely to experience the same situation that we have with Page Park. Everybody knows what we're doing, and great, good work on the part of the
And one of the
committee and
reasons
the
why
village
we're eager to
manager.
get this decision made is because some of the next actions are the responsibility of the contractor, and so we'd like
Okay.
to get them moving on that.
So Councilman Orr, are you making a motion to accept the proposal from Managed Homes?
I am.
Okay. Is there support for that? Councilman Measy? Is there discussion?
Could I just amend the motion to include the cost of,
Sure.
which is what we normally do? So
be great.
accept the proposal from Managed Homes
At
for
$171,000?
171,
Up to.
up
to-
for.
Right,
up-
Julian? That 171 is the top end of a range.
Okay, so accept the proposal from Managed Homes for up to 171,000.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
So,
Council Member Solt, thank you. Is there any discussion? Does
I'm
everybody
sorry,
understand
I
what-
didn't hear the second. I heard
The
Mr.
second was
Measy,
Councilman Measy,
and you were the first. Okay,
or was the mover?
thank you, thank you.
So is there discussion on the motion? Yes, Councilman Schaefer.
So this is what we did. This is what we did last month with the shuttle contract, just to request that it come back to the council for review before it goes for signature.
Village Manager?
I'm sorry, what comes
Well,
comes
like
back?
the shuttle contract, we all got it. I sent you several suggested changes, which may not have gotten looked at if it just went for signature. So I'm asking for the same process where we get to review it before it gets signed.
The contract for the ADA work, for this
Yes.
work? This
Yes.
contract? I don't-
Is the contract in the materials that we received? We have their proposal.
No. We'll use a boilerplate standard contract that the attorney prepared for us, and we just apply it to this job. So I'm not sure. I think the shuttle bus had some specific things that are unique to the shuttle bus contract that had to be worked out with the language.
Every contract has specific things. So.
But that's up to the council.
Councilman Measy?
I appreciate the desire to be meticulous about this, but I don't want to hold this project up another month till we get the contract, get it back, have us comment, and then have to vote again and go back and forth. I don't think we should have to do
What?
that step. I'd like to support and move ahead right away.
Well, I don't think it requires
Schaefer?
another review. Like with the shuttle contract, if the village manager agrees to just discuss those changes with the attorney and incorporate them, if there's an agreement, I'd be fine with that. I'm not suggesting it comes back again the following month.
Yes,
Could
Councilman.
I suggest, I think things have been going very smoothly among this group. Could I just suggest the addition of, in coordination with the ad hoc committee on the Red House, or something to that effect, to at least we recognizing the back and forth that we've already had?
That's fine.
Could,
That's fine.
Council Member?
I'm kind of lost in this. What are the changes? Because you keep saying changes. What changes?
What I'm saying, almost every time there's a contract that's ready to get signed, if I see it, I suggest changes that more often than not get put into a revised draft. So I'm just asking,
You want to change something?
no,
once
I want the
contract comes.
opportunity to review it and suggest that maybe something's missing, something's not clear, like I did with the shuttle contract.
My suggestion then is that because of just what Councilman Ayers said, this is December and most things shut down typically the second to barely the third week of December. Is it possible to get the contract to us to review it so that it can be reviewed and go back out again
Yeah,
to be signed?
I'm talking about an extra day or two. I'm not saying I get to see
I'm
it after 3
asking
weeks.
the village
Okay.
Yeah,
manager.
I can get a contract together very quickly because we have a boilerplate and we're just basically plugging in the scope of work and their proposal. We refer to their proposal as the scope of work.
So if we can get that out, and then who is signing the contract?
The mayor.
The mayor signs it. So if you can get that to us and then give a deadline when it needs to go back to you so that we can get this done as soon as possible, it'd
Councilmember-
be great. Thank you.
Okay, so the suggestion then is,
I'm
yes.
I'm
Village
sorry, just to
Manager.
clarify, this is the working group only that I'm going
That's
to
what I was
with
going
the
to ask about
contract.
it. So,
That's my proposal.
yeah, okay. Yes,
So,
Councilmember Sol.
so are the words "in coordination with the ad hoc committee on the Red House" part of the motion? Because we were
I-
talking.
I'm happy to amend my motion to reflect that.
Okay, okay. I just want to be clear here. Mhm.
And then I guess, as long as Mr. Meesy's comfortable.
Michael, are you okay with that? Why not, huh? Mhm.
I'm just making a note, because the motion then is to approve a contract of up to $171,000 and to have the contract developed in coordination with the ad hoc Red House Committee.
I'm
And-
sorry, I have different words. Can I share
Yes,
what I
please.
have?
Sure.
To accept the proposal from Managed Homes for up to $171,000 in coordination with the ad hoc committee on the Red House.
Okay.
That's at least what I have, and I
That's
thought
fine.
we were talking about.
Thank you
Okay.
for
I-
that clear statement
I
of,
thi- I think what we're asking for is to authorize the village manager in coordination with the council to negotiate a contract with Manage Homes for up to $171,000,
So were we changing
Is
the
that-
motion here?
right? Yeah,
So were we changing the motion?
if that's okay, yeah.
In coordination with the working group, not with the
The working
council.
group, I'm sorry, yeah, sorry.
Yep.
Thank you, Joey.
Would you mind repeating that, please?
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
To authorize the
Mhm.
village manager in
Mhm.
coordination with the Red House Committee. Working group. Thank you.
Working group, uh-huh.
To negotiate a contract with
Negotiate.
Manage Home pursuant to their proposal for up to $171,000.
and there was, Councilman, discussion about doing this on a timely basis. Do you want to say something about that in the motion so we don't get confused later on that it's not until sometime in January where this goes out?
I wouldn't object to that. I'm not sure how we would capture that in the language we just wrote, but I don't have I'm a strong proponent of getting this out the door as quickly as possible.
Okay.
Mm.
So let me, yes, Village Manager
I
Mansfield.
was just going to say, I can move quickly, so that doesn't need to be specified in the motion, but I will get this out quickly to the working group, and then it has to go to so the working group looks at it first, then it goes to the contractor. Then it comes back for the mayor's signature.
Does it go to our attorney in there somewhere?
It doesn't really need to, because it's a boilerplate
Well,
that he's already done. He's already drafted the contract. I'm just plugging in the name of the contractor and
Our
the scope
attorney's-
of work. Our attorney has drafted this contract for all of our contracts. It's a template that we use.
The benefit of this
The
motion is that
scope,
we
the,
can
the
have,
s- the scope of work is an attachment of the contract that specifies everything from the proposal.
and I think the point of the addition to the motion is that if there are specific lessons learned, for example, from our Page Park discussions and additional language we'd want to add to that boilerplate, we'll have the opportunity to do that, so.
But are you suggesting it goes to our attorney or just?
Well, I think I think you and Councilwoman Tyler and I can discuss with
Okay.
Julie and figure out a plan. That's my recommendation.
So does everybody understand the motion to begin with? And does everyone understand, although it's not part of the motion, the timeliness with which the contract will be reviewed and turned around? Is there any, and I'd like that to be somehow reflected in the minutes so that there's no misunderstanding. Actually, it will be reflected in the recording of the meeting. So any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Okay,
I'd like to proceed with a roll call.
Sure.
Mr.
Yes.
R4, Nisi? Sneezy, 4. Schaefer?
Yes.
Schaefer, 4. Sold, 4. Tyler? Tyler, 4. White?
Yes.
White, 4. Pastrunk?
Abstain.
Thank you.
And just for the purposes of the record, since it will be the recording, which is the record, the conclusion of the council was that the committee should turn this around quickly, and that the village manager is able to provide the committee with a draft contract very quickly. Discussion, anything else on this? I think we're done with that then. So we're at discussion and vote on the shuttle bus contract. Mayor White?
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion that we go ahead with the proposal from RMA, but I know that our treasurer has some concerns, and I wanted to give him a chance to air those too.
Yeah, so I read the
Hold on
I'm
just a
sorry.
second. Do we need
I'm
a
sorry.
second before we can?
Do you want to
So my
move the
motion.
contract?
Yeah.
Okay, so the mayor has moved the, and I just want to make sure I'm referring to it correctly.
I need to read the amount too.
Yeah, let me just see where this is. So this is your motion, as I understand it, Mayor White, is to approve the contract for services with RMA Coach for, let's see, for during the first year, $434,515 per year.
Oh, excuse
Yes.
me? We normally do the total for the whole, like the 5-year contract, that one number.
Yeah, that's fine. I know
Okay.
that in the past, one or another council member has wanted to reflect the increases. That's why I went that way, but I'm
Okay.
happy to have the total amount. And Village Manager Mansfield, the total amount is?
Well, the total amount was approved last month. You were just approving the contract. The proposal and the total, all of that was approved last month.
Okay. What is,
So the contract just reflects the
Oh.
approved cost of the proposal split into 5 years. But the amounts were approved, the amount was approved last month's meeting.
okay, so we're,
Could I, do you mind
Yes,
if I ask
please.
a question? So we're approving the contract. That's all we need to
That's
do here?
all you're doing. That's all you're doing. You approved the
Okay.
proposal last month.
Okay, I
And then the
understand. Thank
request
you.
was to have the contract come back to the council for final approval.
So I withdraw the comment I made to you. Okay,
Thank you.
sorry about that.
thank you,
Mhm.
that's okay. Thanks for getting clarification. So, Mayor White, your motion, as I understand it, is to approve the contract for services with RMA Coach LLC. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is there support for that motion? Thank you.
I seconded Martha, Councilman Sullivan.
Okay. So there has been a motion to accept the contract with RMA Coach LLC with the Village of Friendship Heights. That's fine, too, to approve the contract for services between the Village of Friendship Heights and RMA Coach LLC. It was moved by Mayor White, supported by Councilmember Tyler. Is there discussion on the motion? Councilman Schaefer.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I read the contract. I had several issues, comments, whatever. And some of them I think were substantive. For example, under the fuel surcharge, in one place it says it's based on regular gas. 2 lines later it says it's based on the price of diesel fuel. Those are very different amounts. There were some other suggestions. So if maybe Mayor White, and I don't need to see it again, but if Mayor White maybe could amend the motion, or we have an addendum subject to our attorney looking at my suggested changes or comments.
Are there other,
There were about 6 of them, 7, something like that. I mean, some of them were in deal breakers. Some I thought were, like it refers to a timetable. There is no timetable in the contract. So that's not insignificant.
There will be a timetable. It's a schedule.
Right, but
The schedule will be attached to
No, I know
the
that,
part of the
but that
contract.
was one of the point. What's the start date? Because we have to give 180 days notice on our current, so that we have to make sure we get that right. So
so Councilman Schaefer, Village Manager Mansfield, do you have the suggestions that were made by Councilman Schaefer
Yeah,
that he's
they were-
alluding to?
They were sent to the whole council and copied to me, yes.
Okay. And is there any problem with getting those to our attorney to get them incorporated before the contract goes to the mayor for signature?
No, I don't see any issue. We'll follow up with the attorney.
Mayor White?
Should we summarize them for the benefit of the public?
Sure.
Roy, do you want to summarize them?
I don't even know if I have them.
I have it here. I can summarize.
Okay.
The first,
But again, I did copy I didn't copy the entire, I copied the committee and staff. So
So would you like to tell us what they are?
I didn't,
I've
yeah, I
got
don't
it.
have them.
I've got it here. I
Okay,
can- I
Village
can-
Manager?
Yeah, the first one is a start date specifying that the start date should be July 1st, 2025. Although I think there's a caveat there because it depends on when the buses arrive.
Okay, I just,
So
yeah, I
the
didn't want,
the previous contract, there was a floating start date until the buses actually arrived, and that became the start
okay.
date.
I wanted to make
So
sure
that's-
we didn't overlap because we do have
Right.
to give 6 months' notice on it.
Right.
Okay.
The second one is termination for convenience. This gives the village the right to purchase the bus based on the undepreciated amount of the vehicle, but it doesn't give the dollar amount.
Doesn't give the price that we could purchase the bus for.
So would that
There's,
be a depreciated amount, or is that what
Yeah,
you're?
well, it's the price less the depreciation, but the price isn't there.
Okay.
So that's not going to be a legal opinion. That's going to be a number
Correct.
from the contractor. So some of this will be to the lawyer, and some of this will be back to the contractor. Add wording stating the contractor will continue to provide proof that they're maintaining insurance for the term of the contract. Current wording says they only have to provide proof initially. Timetable is not included in the scope of work, but it will be. What happens if we want to change the timetable? I mentioned that earlier in response to Councilmember R. There was discussion with a vendor about payment for travel time. The contract should be clear the village is not paying for the transportation of the bus to and from the site prior to or after the timetable hours. Scope of work, about the fuel surcharge and diesel versus regular gas, so we can clarify that with the contractor.
Mayor White? Okay,
That's fine.
okay. So, yes, Councilman R?
Just a question for consideration. I note in the this appendix exhibit, there's reference to the availability of a mobile app, and I know we talked about that a little bit earlier. It was also a significant piece of feedback that we heard in the last meeting of the Shuttle Bus Committee as we were considering the individual performers. Delay, for example, in this exhibit has an explicit penalty attached. Everything else seems to refer back. Anything without an explicit penalty seems to refer back to the enforcement section of the main contract, which says that we're entitled to all expenses, including court costs and reasonable attorney's fees. Now, I don't foresee us spending a lot or really any money resolving an app outage or failure for them to deliver on the app. Do we want to consider some penalty for failure to deliver, reasonable penalty for failure to deliver the app, recognizing that a lot of the users are reliant on the app for pickup and drop-off times? I don't know if that's an option. Again, recognizing that these things are somewhat finicky and that we can't guarantee, in the same way that we expect the bus to be where it's going to be when it's supposed to be, like the 1 hour delay penalty in the previous section. I wonder if for extended outages we should consider at least some consequence.
Yes, Councilmember Tyler.
I understand, if I stand correctly, I think I understand what you're trying to get at, is the outages, but you start getting into semantics of words, and it becomes kind of nitpicky, because if you ride Metro's bus, their app goes out pretty frequently that they have no control over it. So I think you'll get into a verbal war of proof to say that the company is responsible for the outage, or is it the internet connection that's part of the outage, or whose outage is it, and then how much should they pay? Sometimes we can just become too picky on it. I think if they deliver the app in time, if we find that, let's say over 6 months, that there's a constant problem with the app, that could be brought to their attention, and then maybe a reduction in cost of what we're paying for that app. But I don't think the app, if I stand corrected, I don't think the app is broken down as to how much it costs. So that's just a service within that package. I think when we start getting into whose problem is the outage, you're getting into the weeds of people splitting hairs.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer and I don't have a good solution, but recognizing that that was one of the small handful of things that the community reported as a real value to the service, I just wanted to mention it here. I do see it called out specifically, which I was pleased to see in this exhibit, but I did notice a difference, and the fact that those two sections are one after another highlighted it for me. So I just wanted to raise it for the group in case anyone did have a good, more elegant solution to addressing it. I don't have a problem with the language as it is.
Mayor White?
I agree with Councilwoman Tyler, and I also recognize you pointing out that this is an important feature. But as someone who uses the WMATA app twice a day, I don't think it's realistic to, in the beginning at least, to put too much stock into the app with RMA. I think it's more of a joint effort to see what works and what doesn't work. Because, like I said, the WMATA app, if it says the bus is going to be there in 5 minutes, you better be at the bus stop 10 minutes, because it's just not that accurate. So.
Okay, so is there any further discussion about the motion to approve the shuttle bus contract? And yes,
I need some clarification. Are we approving the shuttle bus contract subject to the 6 Schaefer codicils here, or are we approving the contract as it is, or are we
Thank
saying
you.
that?
yes.
Hey, what's going on?
I think that what I think I heard was, and please, members, correct me if I'm wrong, is to approve the contract with the suggestions that Council Member Schaefer has made, and to authorize the village manager to authorize the mayor to sign the contract pending discussion with our attorney.
But, so, trying to anticipate here, you know, the village manager and the attorney and the bus company are able to resolve 4 of the 6, I think it was 6 things that Councilman Schaefer raised. 2 are unresolved. Does this come back to the council? Does it come back to Councilman Schaefer? Does it just go to the mayor at that point to make a decision?
What's your pleasure, and what would you?
My pleasure is to get the damn thing done, and so
Right.
I'd like, excuse me, my pleasure is to get the thing done, to trust Julian and the mayor and our attorney to negotiate on those issues and try to get clarification of those issues, and then have the mayor make a decision about whether whether we should sign it and go ahead.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, so is there, the motion then is to approve the contract with RMA Coach LLC, and to authorize the mayor to sign the contract contingent upon discussions between the attorney, the village manager, and the mayor.
That's fine.
Well, that's the motion. Mayor White, is that acceptable?
Yes.
That's what you said, isn't it, originally?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And I second.
I'm
Okay.
sorry, if you don't mind telling me the words after the word contingent, authorizing the mayor to sign the contract contingent on
The
discussions with
the
Okay.
discussions among the village manager, our
Hold on,
attorney,
hold on.
and the
Among
mayor.
Village manager, attorney, and
The mayor.
mayor.
You have village manager, mayor, and attorney,
Yes,
right?
Okay.
Okay,
I have it. Sorry, I just want to get it right.
thank you. Any discussion? Councilman Measy, is that motion clear?
Perfectly clear.
Thank you. Yeah. Maybe I'll ask you, Councilman Shaver, to repeat it just to make sure we've got it clear. Just teasing. So there's a motion on the floor, moved by Mayor White and supported by Councilmember Tyler. Is there any further discussion?
Why don't you just ask Martha to call the roll? We don't have to raise our hand here.
Yeah, all right.
Okay, thank you. Mr. R?
Yes.
R4, Measy?
Yes.
Measy 4, Schaefer?
4.
Schaefer 4, Solt 4, Tyler?
Yes.
Tyler 4, White?
Yes.
White 4, Pestrunk?
Abstain.
Pestrunk abstain.
Uh,
Thank you.
Thank you. That takes us on to the discussion of the new initiatives budget line item and the process for that new initiatives project. Council members have this as the last item under tab 6 in their book. There was discussion at the previous council meeting about this draft. There were suggestions made by Councilman R. and Councilman Schaefer. They have been included in this draft. And in addition, because this referenced the Community Advisory Committee, I talked with Chairman Butcher of the CAC to discuss whether this role that's described here was one that the CAC could accommodate. And his response was that he believes that they can. He made one suggestion, which I think is a reasonable one, and that's when they receive the proposals from the council, if in fact this solicitation of interest is adopted by the council, that those proposals be blinded so that nobody knows what organization has proposed. And that the same is true for the council when it votes on them, so that the council is not aware, because the village manager will have already vetted these to be sure they're from an organization that, or an individual. So that was his response. So I would move approval of this new initiatives project solicitation of interest with the addition that the proposals be blinded before they're sent to the CAC, and as also when the council considers them ultimately, because the CAC will only be making recommendations, the council will be making final decisions on it. Let me see whether there's support for that motion.
A point of order.
Yes.
The agenda says discussion. It doesn't say discussion vote.
And I have suggested changes too, so,
Okay. So it does.
or additions, rather.
It does say discussion.
Only discussion.
It does say only discussion. That's what the agenda says. It appears there would be objection to adopting this here. Okay, so Councilwoman Solt, you have some changes that you'd like to suggest as well?
Yeah. I think the first sentence of the second paragraph should be deleted. And you know how there was a modification to sort of separate the concept of the idea from the execution? I think in parts of this draft, they aren't really separated. For example, one might have to provide, a time frame and a budget. If I don't know how to implement my idea, I might not be able to provide those. I would maybe say, like, maybe best estimate, or if you know this, and not make it a firm requirement. Or to be honest with you, if I were submitting this, I think it would be better to have like a box. Are you submitting only the idea, or the idea and execution together? And then it's clear.
I think that-
what they're sort of asking for. So,
Thank you for that.
yeah,
So, let me respond to that.
okay, sure.
For that suggestion and for others, would you take this draft,
Uh-huh,
mark it up
Sure.
in pen, and just give me your suggested language?
sure,
Okay.
that's fine. But there's sort of a, for lack of a better term, sort of important idea here. So, someone submitting a proposal, and obviously it might cost them money to further the proposal. Are we fronting the money to them? This is a cash flow issue. Or are we reimbursing them after they complete, or whoever completes the project?
Do you
That's
have-
really crucial, because, I mean, I would think for many people in the community might not have $4,000 to execute their idea.
So let me just
It's
ask
not- it's
to clarify
what I'm-
that one and to clarify your suggestion. What you're suggesting is that we have the opportunity to front the money so that problem doesn't arise?
I don't have that much experience with grants, and I don't know who else does, but we need to, I think we should do it whatever the normal way is. I think you do front the money. You're awarded the money, again, if you're executing, you're awarded the money, and then you have the funds to do what you said you were going to do.
That's exactly right. You award the money, and then you have an accounting system to decide whether the money is being spent appropriately. But you don't go ahead with the grant money without having the money itself. You don't spend the money. But I'm sorry.
Yes, go ahead, Councilman.
I have a suggestion here. I mean, now, given the fact that we're not going to be voting on this, and now you're pushing everything into January, you're going to have to change all the time frames in terms of when these things are due. Just so that we can avoid, well, now, I don't know if this is appropriate, but is it possible for us to have a straw vote to see whether there's majority support to go ahead with this project? Because my concern, Bobby, is that you've worked so hard on this, and in a sense, you're being jerked around. So let's see whether there's a majority willing to go ahead with this project, then make the changes, then we can go into January, have a discussion and a vote. But if there's no majority ready to support this, and I sense there are people who are opposed, then, it's an idea whose time has not come.
Okay, great. So what's the sense of the council about taking a straw vote on this now? Which is not binding, it's merely to suggest the pleasure of the council, and potentially to save me some time of going back through this and the council some time also. Yes, Councilman Schaefer.
I think it's hard to vote without knowing what the final version is, because we're voting on something that's not fully baked at
I
this
think
point.
what I heard the councilman suggest is on the idea of the new initiatives project, because we've been going over the details for several meetings now. At the last meeting, I asked for suggestions that people had on the draft. Some gave them. There turned out to be some other ones. So it's simply on the idea. And if, in fact, there is support for the idea, then it's worth the council's time and my time.
I mean, some of the suggestions that Martha made, I may be wrong, don't seem to me to be deal breakers. They seem to be clarifications.
Yeah,
So
that's
I
my
think-
intent,
I
yes.
think that's, you can deal with those sorts of things, but let's see.
Okay. So,
But can I ask, is a straw vote something we make a formal record of, or we just are talking among
We're just
ourselves
talking,
for
yeah,
this
just
purpose?
talking
Talking
for
Okay,
this
fine,
purpose.
okay.
Okay.
Mhm.
So would you like to call the roll on that, just to go through? I mean, I don't want to say all in favor, say aye. We're doing a straw vote to see whether there's a majority of council members who want
Okay.
to support the idea.
Hold on. I just asked the question, do we make a formal record of a straw vote? I thought it was a no, so I don't have to write all this.
We don't have to do
So let's just
All right,
talk,
so
okay?
now you're comfortable, everybody say aye,
Yeah,
everybody
raise
say
your
no.
No,
That's fine. So
I-
all those in
favor
favor
of going
of
forward.
going forward with the new initiative project, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. Okay.
You have your
I have my
Right,
answer.
and I'm
the
not,
council
I don't
has
have a
its
record
answer.
of this, and I will
My
send
understanding
you.
is you'll send me
Right,
those,
right.
and we will put the vote on this, a vote on this at the
Right,
January
and
meeting.
there
You'll put them in
I
writing,
think-
thanks.
And I think in good faith, that people who do have concerns should communicate those to Bobby, so that at our next meeting, we don't start springing 8 new different deal breakers or things of that sort on it.
Thank you, Councilman Measy, and thanks for an excellent suggestion on handling the conversation tonight.
I have just one philosophical question. I'm not sure that it requires an edit, so if it's all right, I'll just ask it here. Is there any objection to recognizing that we are asking anyone with a stake in the proposals, we are excluding from the proposal process anyone who may play a role in making a selection, that if particularly the CAC, if a member of the CAC has an interest as a proposal, are we comfortable with recusals from the process? They can say, I choose not to participate in this discussion.
Yep.
No objection to that?
Are you talking about the whole committee or just that?
No, the individual would,
Individual.
an individual who has a proposal
Must
is free to
recuse.
On
say,
the
I'm going to
CAC, okay.
recuse myself from discussions around the initiative. I don't know that we need to write that in here, but as long as we wouldn't object to seeing that in the process, I just wanted to make sure everyone was comfortable with that.
Really, you're suggesting a recusal on the discussion and the vote?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Correct.
Councilman
The
Schaefer.
wording says that a citizens committee can submit a proposal, so the committee under this, it's sort of a contradiction. Because if they can't judge their own submission.
So then let's just write that down on notes and send it
Okay.
forward to Bobby.
Thank you. Okay. Is there any further discussion of the new initiatives proposal? Seeing none, I'll move us into new business. And we have a discussion and vote on the Friendship Heights Alliance request for contribution concerning a pollinator garden. I'd like to divide this discussion into 2 parts, much as we did just now, to see whether there is support for a pollinator garden on the council. And then if there is, to see in what fashion that request might be paid for. So on the issue of whether there's support for a contribution for the pollinator garden, first, Village Manager, is there anything that you wanted to tell us about this as background?
The memo that I included in the packet provides a pretty good summary and background from Natalie Avery, just describing the pollinator project and what they were doing. And they did come to the village, and the Parks and Grounds Committee approved, it gave consent for the pollinator garden to be planted. And then subsequently they came back, and this was all at the expense of the Alliance. Then subsequently they came back to us and requested a $1,000 contribution to offset some of the maintenance costs because they had to do additional maintenance work. And that was discussed at the Parks and Grounds Committee, and the Parks and Grounds Committee approved that request, subject to attorney's opinion about the legality of making this contribution, in compliance with the village charter. You then receive the attorney's opinion, which I included in the packet, which indicated that it is a legal use. It would be considered a legal use of village funds.
Chairman, I have
Yeah.
quite a few comments before people vote.
Would you
I
like,
think
go
they,
ahead. I was going to ask whether there are
I'm
comments
sorry.
from council members about
I was just going to observe, just to add, and it may go without saying, but the reason we're having this conversation is that the pollinator garden is on village property. So we're not just supporting a community organization, but the actual infrastructure, we own the infrastructure.
Yes, go ahead, Council
okay, thank you.
Member Salt.
We were approached some time ago requesting permission to put a pollinator garden with native species in what I call the berm area within the village, and that was done on, next to Friendship Boulevard. We were told there would be no cost to us. And this is consistent with other projects that are described on the Friendship Heights Alliance website, that they do special cleaning and landscaping projects in the village. So on October 5th, they planted 14 native species using 10 volunteers. And for those who don't know, the Friendship Heights Alliance is a property owner collaborative. It's a 501c6. It's led by a board of directors comprised of large developers and commercial property owners. And funding for the organization is received mostly from property owners along the Wisconsin Avenue corridor on the DC and Maryland side, and they receive funds from the DC and Montgomery County government. So after they organize the plantings, then they come and ask, and we agreed that it would be, and we accepted because, at least in part, it would be no cost. They asked for $1,000, and the documentation provided in the packet says to further improve the village garden by adding edging and replacing mulch, and to further leverage their investment. So I have a number of concerns about this. I mean, like the first one is, this is kind of changing the rules after we played the game. They said it would be no cost, and now they're asking for money. We would be transferring taxpayer funds to a business-controlled, developer-controlled entity. I really don't think that's proper. And as I guess the legal opinion mentioned, you know, this has to be considered a donation, and I really don't think we should be using taxpayer funds to be donating to a developer's organization. But I think there's really another way around this problem, and that's that the village is really perfectly capable of adding edging and replacing the mulch. And, you know, I fully, you know, support keeping the plants in, you know, maintaining the plants as much as need be done. But we have our own landscaping contractor that can do exactly this function of adding edging and replacing mulch, and for probably a lot less than $1,000. And if we even were to provide the $1,000 to the Friendship Heights Alliance, we have no idea whether they would spend that on within the village or part of their broader boundaries. So if I have a two-part motion to address this issue, can I
Let me see
proceed
whether
with
there's
that?
further discussion.
Oh, sure,
since you
fair
asked
enough,
for
fair enough.
discussion. Any other comments? Yes, Councilman Measy, then Councilman Schaefer.
I want to thank Martha for her comments. Julian, do we have the, as Martha suggests, do we have the capacity to do the work that they're doing? That they,
Sure.
I mean, through Green Sweep or whoever does this sort of stuff for us, it does not sound like a huge job.
No, it's not it's
I
just a
mean-
job that they did for us.
I mean, I'm no longer involved with the Friendship Heights Alliance, but I was at one point, and while Martha's right that they are developers, they're also, at least at this stage, they're doing things which I think are useful in the community and useful here in the village, so I'd like to be supportive of this. I'm a little bit concerned about it being called a donation, and I think Ron's view is that we can do it, but it's probably wise, may not be wise to set that precedent. So would it be possible for us to contact the Alliance, the people there, and say, we'll do the work up to a cost of $1,000?
The work's been done already.
The work's already been done already.
Yeah, it's all been done. They're
I
asking
mean,
they're
the
asking
addition-
to offset some costs that they incurred.
Oh, so
The
this
work is
offset
completed.
costs. Oh, I see. I'm sorry. I got the impression that it had not yet been done, and they're waiting for our contribution. Okay. Sorry, Martha.
So let me go Councilman Schaefer and
Yeah,
then
so, and
Councilmember
this,
Tyler.
as Councilmember Solt said, this avoids sort of us from having a philosophical discussion about should we be making charitable contributions, and then who else might we be making to, and for what purpose, and if they do something for us like a garden. So I think this bypasses that whole much more serious discussion, and just we can pay less than $1,000 and save ourselves from a donation that would be $1,000.
Councilmember Tyler, and then Councilmember R.
Julia, how many, I know I watched them put that plantings in right up here, and they put the edging. That's what she had gone back for, is the edging and the mulch. But my other question well, my real question is, how many planters have the Alliance put in this side of I'll say in Friendship Heights Village? How many have they installed with plants and upkeep of everything? Because I know they put those big round ones in, and they're on the different corners. There's some right up here in Wisconsin. Do you know how many other plantings?
There's no planting containers in the village itself. The containers you're referring to, the ones that are on the corners, that they're like on Western and Wisconsin.
Right.
And there's several on Wisconsin Avenue. There's none of those within the village's jurisdiction proper.
Not even on Wisconsin?
I don't believe so.
I thought
think
there was
they're all.
maybe
I think
one.
they're closer to the DC side. But this pollinator garden is within
I know
the
the
village.
pollinating garden
And then there's
is
a
there.
second pollinator garden that's on the DC side that they did
Right.
one, and they wanted to do one on DC side, one on Maryland side. But
Well, my
the containers, I don't believe, well, unless there's one at South Park in Wisconsin.
I think
there may
there's.
be
I
one
think
there.
we do have some
Yeah.
of those planters in
I think-
village property.
I think that's
And
right.
I asked that question because if we agree to say, okay, we're going to take over maintaining the pollinator, then are we being tit for tat or looking ahead that then maybe we have to take care of everything that the Alliance puts in to the village? I think, is that the way we may be needing to think?
I don't. There may be one at South Park in Wisconsin.
I
think
think
that
there
would
is
probably be the
one
only one
planter
that's.
that
I
is
think
in
that would be the
village
only one that's
property.
in the village, because
Mm.
generally they're
Mhm.
further down on the DC side.
And I only bring that up, I mean, squabbling about who's taking care of the property, my concern is how many planters or how many other vegetation things has the Alliance put in the village property? And so if they have put them, and I think there is one of the big, large planters on Wisconsin that is in the village property, then do we take care of that too?
No indication from them that we would. No,
So-
this was specific to the pollinator garden.
Yeah.
No information from them that they want us to take those over, any of those other planters.
Councilman Orr?
So I also was under the impression that, at least from the language of the letter, that this was a prospective cost, not a reimbursement cost. So in light of the fact that it sounds like at least this round of work has already been done, are we now discussing, and Mr. Schaefer suggested that this was maybe a solution that got us to a resolution here without implicating some of the items outlined in the legal opinion, but knowing now that this work has already been done and we can't ask our contractors to do it, I'm not entirely clear on what the current proposal is. Are we now, is the only option now we cut them $1,000 check or we don't? Or are we considering a third way that might be, if you had asked us before you did the work, we might have been willing to discuss an alternative, so come to us earlier next time, we might figure something out, but unfortunately, we're not in a position to give you a $1,000 check now. Is this a two-part answer at this point?
Councilmember Sol?
I haven't made my proposal yet, but I think it addresses what you're talking about. Can I
Let me just
proceed?
see whether there's any further conversation.
Sure, fair enough.
Okay.
Mhm.
Any further conversation? Yes, Councilmember Maisy.
I'm still looking for a way out here. It seems, Julian, will there be ongoing maintenance of this particular part of the, I'm sorry, I'm from Brooklyn, we don't know from pollinator gardens, so it's.
We are told there should be minimal ongoing maintenance once the plants really take, and by this coming spring. So there will be no more watering needed. They did water them at their cost initially. The edging is in place. That shouldn't need to be replaced.
I mean,
So it should be minimal maintenance
Councilman-
Well,
going
can
forward.
we-
And let me just,
Yeah, go
for the record, they did request this before they did the work.
ah,
This was requested on November 8th, and we're a month
Yeah, 'cause
later.
the thing I'm thinking about, and I'm
So
not
they
sure
put in the request to us for the contribution before the work was done. But in the time that we've taken to decide this, they've gone ahead and done the work.
So I'm not sure whether we could commit to doing some maintenance later on that they would otherwise have had to pay for, and do it that way.
Councilmember Tyler.
It's interesting you asked that question, Councilman Mees, because if you see the planter, it's right across the street here. Some of the plants are going to have to be, people are going to pick them because it's basil, it's oregano, it's things that are going to be picked. And so, yes, to your point, there will be some, but it won't be like major pruning. But there'll be some upkeep behind it. How much, I don't know. And Councilmember Ayer brought out the language, which is a suggested dollar amount of $1,000. So that is an out to say we appreciate your suggested a dollar amount of $1,000, but unfortunately we did not plan for this in our budget. However, we can give you X amount of dollars, and it could be much less.
So,
And that way we save face with being with Alliance, since we are working with them, and they do work with us constantly.
yeah, this is just, we're into just random discussion now about this whole idea. Let me see whether there are other thoughts about it. Councilman Schaefer.
Julian, this says the work was done October 5th, and the invoice came in November 8th,
The planting was done October 5th.
which
The-
is most
the-
of it, right?
The planting of the garden was done October 5th. This
Right.
is the metal edging and the mulch maintenance work
but
that
the-
came later.
But it was basically installed a month before they came to us for the money.
That's right.
Okay.
Councilman R.
No, I was just going to highlight, as the village manager said, there's sort of multiple phases of this project. The first of which was, well, I mean, the first phase of this predated the 5th, right? They acquired all the plants, they did the research, they got a UDC professor, then they installed on the 5th, then they had a few other maintenance days, then apparently later in November, they installed this additional mulch and edging. They had a cleanup day mid-November, I think, and then we'll continue to do work through the spring. So, again, I was under the impression they were anticipating incurring this cost, and you know, it sounds like they were on the 8th, but that was subsequent to costs incurred to procure the material and plant the garden on the 5th.
So other conversation, there's one point that I just learned about, and that is this particular strip is not within the boundaries of the Alliance, okay? It was the Alliance as a partner of the village. The Alliance was wanting to promote pollinator gardens for reasons that I'm sure committee members and council members would appreciate. So out of their good faith, there was this section. I'm not sure, maybe there were conversations with people in the Willoughby next to whose building this site was, but they decided on their own to create this second pollinator garden. So this was, you know, a generous contribution from the Business Alliance already, and I think that there were a considerable number of volunteers from the village and maybe elsewhere who participated in the construction of the pollinator garden, and all of that was organized by the Business Alliance as well. I also think it's probably the case that whatever it will take to maintain this, because there will be maintenance necessary, if we give it to our own contractor, it's likely to cost us more money than letting the Alliance continue to maintain it. And my reading of our attorney's opinion was that we can do this. It would take a vote of the council, and we should decide from what line item the expenditure would be taken if we decide to go ahead with it. So I just put that forward as additional information for our consideration. And Councilman R?
Just one last observation that probably should have occurred to me sooner. Since the work has already been done we have an actual cost, right? That cost may be more than 1,000 or less than 1,000, but is there any value in understanding what that cost is and associating our contribution to a specific number rather than an arbitrary $1,000 donation?
Councilman Schaefer?
Yeah, well, then now we're getting away from what's a charitable contribution. Like, do we get a value of $1,000 before we donate $1,000? And I think that's not a good discussion to have.
So I want to do what I suggested we do at the beginning before we hear a specific proposal, which is to see whether there's support for this pollinator garden on behalf of the council as kind of an indication of whether there is. If there is, then it sounds like Councilwoman Salt has a proposal to make that go forward.
When you say support for pollinator garden, I don't think that's the issue at all. That really muddles it. We're talking about a financial transaction. That's what we've been asked to do. I'm limiting, I mean, who doesn't love pollinator gardens? I mean, that's not what we're talking about. It's the
It's not clear to me that there aren't people who don't love the pollinators, but would you like to offer your specific
Well, if you're ready, because you seem
I'm
to.
ready. I think
Okay.
there's no more
Well,
conversation.
Okay,
Thank
fine.
you.
But I have to sort of respond to, you talking about, how generous the Friendship Heights Alliance is. I'm not against the Friendship Heights Alliance. And you said, oh, they did this in good faith. Well, good faith is also making good when you say you're going to do something at no cost. That's making good, too. And, I mean, that's, I think that's very important to recognize, which was kind of my first point. Changing the rules after you play the game is sort of what I call unfair and not good faith. So my proposal is basically two-part. I'll kind of read it fast and then I can slow down if you want to hear it again. To authorize the village manager to communicate with the Friendship Heights Alliance to identify specific requirements for plant maintenance in the pollinator garden. That's so that we understand what may need to be done going forward. And then to authorize the village manager to make arrangements with our landscaping contractor to perform the specified plant maintenance for the pollinator garden. So it could be very, very minimal because they are, these types of plants are supposed to be, not have to be watered and so forth. I can tell you, having a community garden plot in Montgomery County, mulch is very cheap. I mean, I really feel quite strongly we should not be paying Friendship Heights Alliance.
So, Councilmember Salt, is that a motion?
Yes, it's a two-part motion. I can repeat it if you wish.
I have it as that the village manager should communicate with the Alliance to obtain an estimate on the plant maintenance
To
requirement.
identify specific requirements for plant maintenance in the pollinator garden, and then to authorize the village manager to make arrangements with our landscaping contractor to perform those specified, that specified plant maintenance.
Okay, so is the motion clear? Anybody have any questions about the motion? Is there support for the motion? Councilman Schaefer? Okay, I'm not going to attempt to repeat the motion because it's already been repeated and stated clearly by Councilmember Salt. It's been supported by Councilmember Schaefer. Any further discussion on the motion? Yes, I see a couple of hands. Yes, Councilmember Barr.
I have a little bit of concern with the suggestion. I think specific requirements for plant maintenance might be too broad a term for what we're trying to accomplish. I don't think, and I'm open to a discussion if people want to talk about it, but I don't think we're entertaining taking responsibility for this garden. We've given them the property on which they intend to run this project. If we suggest that we intend to solicit requirements to maintain these plants into the future, I think we're biting off quite a bit more than, certainly even going well beyond our initial agreement to let them use currently unused property in the village. That has the potential, I think, to be a much bigger cost. So my sense is if we could find a better term, something narrower to speak specifically, and again, that's the unfortunate thing about this work already been having, this specific work already having been performed.
Mayor White?
I think rather than committing ourselves to doing the work that they have outlined or will outline, that we should make it a possibility, because it could be that they're over there and they have a half a truck of mulch and they could just dump it down, a year from now and it wouldn't cost anything. Whereas if we were to go to our landscaper and say, we have this new project we want you to take on, I think we should retain the option of either doing it ourselves or having them do it and then think about a possible contribution. I think we're locking ourselves in a box when we say we will take on the maintenance of this.
Can I respond to that, or is it?
Well, and maybe modify the motion if they refuse, because they may continue it, as Mayor White said, they may do it anyway. So if they don't continue to do it, then we would take it on.
I'm trying to
Councilmember Sol.
find a way to avoid paying them.
Right, but that
If
doesn't
they
change.
want to keep doing it, that's fine
Well,
with
that's
me.
the point. We just, we find out the mains. If they don't continue to do it without a donation, then we would take it on. I think that addresses Mayor
That's-
White's concern.
That's fine. Should I amend the
You
motion?
would,
or
sounds like you need to, because it's a
Okay.
different proposal. I'd give you a second to think about it. Let me see if there's other comments.
And that would be May then, right, to the mayor's point. If they choose not to continue this project, we have the option to continue it, not the obligation.
Yes.
Which I guess, to put a finer point on it, would result in us giving them nothing at this point, except the land on which they've started this project.
Yes, Councilman. Ambrosio.
While Martha's,
I'm sorry.
Martha's
I'm close.
Well, Martha's wordsmithing, what I sense where the council doesn't want to do this, at least there's not a majority on the council to do this. But I would like us to be able to communicate to the Alliance that we are a willing participant in a lot of what they're doing, and that we benefit from what they do, and the larger community benefits from what they do. And that we are willing to entertain in the future, if there's work to be done that would benefit directly Friendship Heights, that we would be prepared to work with them to do that without having to go through this donation of a unspecified amount of money for work that's already been done. I guess that may not be part of the motion, but I'd like to be able to communicate this to the people in the Alliance, that that we're not hostile to what they're doing. We want to be supportive of it.
It's sort of what I said earlier, is that we didn't plan this in our budget, but we want to still be, partners and work with you. But if you can include us in the planning of your ideas of what you want to put down, then maybe we can put that in a budget going forward.
Well, I'm less inclined to hang it on the budget issue. I know Roy will think differently.
I don't either, but I
because,
think it's more important to say,
I mean, we've got the money.
we just didn't plan.
We've got
Got the money, but we just didn't plan for it this time. But please keep us abreast of what you might have down the road, that we can be aware of it. It comes back to money, because that is what it is about. I personally would do something different, but because of what Councilmember Ayer pointed out in the language, but we are where we are, and I don't think we need to sit another half hour talking about $1,000 and some plants that are in the ground. So, yes, something should go to them to say something in a very nice manner of how we can continue and do want to work with them just as we've been doing.
Any other comments? Council Member Solt.
I don't think any of us object to having good relationships and saying the things that, and I fully support what Mr. Measy said, and if I could share trying the modification, anything. So the first part really stays the same. We just want to learn what is necessary, information to maintain the plants. So that's to authorize the village manager to communicate with the Friendship Heights Alliance to identify specific requirements for plant maintenance. That's just getting information. The second part would be, as I heard people, if the Friendship Heights Alliance chooses not to continue maintenance of the pollinator garden, the Village of Friendship Heights will have the option to adopt maintenance duties, which is not a commitment. But also, we're not saying we're paying anything. I'm trying to thread the needle to try to address a lot of concerns here.
So that was in the form of a motion?
Yes, please. Mhm.
Okay, so there's been a motion. Does anybody want that motion to be repeated?
Is this a new motion?
This
or
is
an
a new
It's
motion.
a new motion.
I think we're
So what
taking the
The
old one off
two-part
the
motion.
table.
Mhm.
Yep. So it's a new motion.
So I'll second that.
Okay. Is there discussion about that motion? Councilman Orr?
I can't decide. I guess I'll say it again. As a procedural matter, are we then just taking no action on their request for a donation?
I think that's what it is.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any further conversation? I will make a comment. I think it's unfortunate that we are not supporting this, because I think there's a way to support it which would satisfy the provisos and would indicate, even though the Alliance at first approached us to do it, they have now approached us for some funds to do it and support their work in some fashion, or support the pollinator garden. I just think partnerships are extremely important to us. The Alliance is and will continue to be a very important partner to us. So threading this needle, it's a narrow eye in the needle and a thick thread to get through there. Any further discussion?
Can I
Yes.
just ask one question? In terms of, suddenly this $1,000 bill, or whatever it was called, came to us, did anybody in authority in the village tell them that we were going to do this, or leave the imply that we were going to make the $1,000 contribution? Did anybody on the council, did the village manager, was there any commitment to do this, or they just decided to send us this request for the $1,000?
No,
Okay.
they said they were submitting the request. They submitted the request. I didn't commit
That's it.
to it.
I mean, no, we didn't make any informal commitment. Oh, this is a great
Correct.
idea. We're going to go
Right.
ahead. Okay, just
Okay.
wanted to clarify that.
Any further discussion?
I'll just say,
Councilman Orr?
I think on some level, maybe the opposite is true. I think when they approached the Parks and Grounds Committee, when they approached the council initially, I think they explicitly said, we'd like to use your property, and it will be no cost to you.
Yeah.
We intend to maintain it. So I think they actually initially presented the opposite circumstance.
So the motion is to request the village manager to respond to the Alliance. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah,
No, just
do it all together. Let's be done with this. Everybody understand what the motion is?
Yes.
Councilman Orr? No, you good? Okay, so let's call for the question. Would you like to call a roll?
Yes, please.
Yes.
For Beasley,
Yes.
Beasley for Schaefer,
Yes.
Schaefer for Salt, for, Tyler?
Abstain.
Tyler abstain. White? Yes. White for Pestron?
Abstain.
Pestron abstain.
Okay, the
Okay.
motion
Can I make a
carries
comment?
5-0 with 2 abstentions, which brings us to
Can I
the,
make a comment?
yes.
Yeah, I just, and I think it's inappropriate for the chair to give an opinion on a motion and then abstain on it, and I'll leave it at that.
Yes, I think Councilman Schaefer, I've explained my process for this in the past. Thank you for your
Mr.
observation.
Chairman, excuse me.
Yes.
So
Roger.
just to clarify that last vote, so the answer to the question, are we donating the $1,000, is we're not, or we're not addressing that?
We're not.
We're not responding to the request?
We're not addressing the $1,000. You're exactly right.
I believe our current position, and please correct me, but I think the current position based on advice received is that we can only make charitable donations through an action of the council. And the
But
council
am I
has-
giving them an affirmative no that we're not giving the money? Okay.
Yeah, Council Member Tyler.
This is my exact problem, because we have not answered their question. We have gone around it, but we have not answered the one question. Are we giving them $1,000? Are we not? And none of that has been stated. And Julian, and the village manager's question is very clear.
Would anybody like to make a motion specifically on that point? Council Member Salt.
Just give me a second, I have a piece of paper in front of me while I talk. I move to deny the request by the Friendship Heights Alliance for the $1,000 contribution for the colony department. Is that correct?
Well, we'll
Could
soon
I
find-
suggest it,
We'll soon find out. Yes, Councilman Orr.
that it may be a more useful motion in the affirmative? That the motion is to authorize the donation of $1,000 to the Friendship Heights Alliance for the purposes of the pollinator garden? And if it doesn't get a majority, then we don't meet the legal standard to make the donation?
Well, Councilman Orr, are you making a motion?
I'm happy to make that motion.
authorize the $1,000?
I'm happy to let Councilwoman Salt amend the motion, or I'm happy to make it, whichever is easier.
Well, I
Okay.
think this, why don't you make the motion, and we'll see whether there's support?
So I move to authorize the village manager to make a $1,000 donation to the Friendship Heights Alliance for the purposes of the maintenance of the pollinator garden.
Is there support for that motion? Yeah.
Costanza, then you'll have to vote against your own motion.
Well, okay,
Yes, we'll see,
so
Michael.
I will support that motion. Is there discussion about the motion? Everybody understand what the motion is? Okay, would you like to call a roll, please? Call the votes?
Yes.
Hold it. Is that, what's the motion?
The motion is to authorize the
To authorize.
$1,000 to the Alliance for the pollinator garden,
To authorize it.
to authorize it.
Yes, I'm pass for now. Come back to me. I'm going to pass.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
I'm going to say no.
The motion fails. Anything else on this? Okay. we're on to the introduction of changes to the village bylaws. Village Manager Mansfield, before I move, do you have any further questions?
No, just wanted to clarify the
Thank
actual
you.
question before you, so thank you
Okay.
for doing that.
Okay. So, in the back, last item under tab 7, for the purpose of the public to know what this is, I'm going to read the background here. This is a memo to council members from me regarding amending the bylaws of the Friendship Heights Village Council elected governing body for the special tax district of the Village of Friendship Heights and the Hills, Montgomery County, Maryland. The background is, during my term as chairman, I have frequently referred to the bylaws for guidance. But language in the bylaws can be out of date, unhelpful, confusing, or lacking sufficient detail to be useful. Past and present council members have suggested amending the bylaws. Find below in the packet is a list of suggested amendments for certain articles. I provide 2 documents. The first illustrates the recommendations below following this memo in track change format in case council members wanted to see it. The second divides these recommendations into 2 categories: bylaws changes which should be simple, and others for which thoughtful consideration can assess the advantages and disadvantages of each before reaching a conclusion. According to the current bylaws, a supermajority or 5 votes are needed to amend the bylaws. In addition, any changes require a second reading and vote. And then there's a note which references Robert's Rules of Order, a particular addition, the village charter encourage current village bylaws govern council operations, references, if any, below to the documents are for helpful reference only while considering the specific recommendation. They're not suggested for inclusion in any language proposed. By asking for this and placing it on the agenda today, I'm not suggesting that we have any discussion about it. Council members have just received it with the packet. It may be something and I would suggest it could be something for the next council meeting, or the mayor might ask for a special or ask for another meeting of the council to discuss this specifically, and we can learn later whether that is something that she would like to do. So that's what this is about. Council Member Measy.
Well, a few things. First, I want to thank the chair for going through these bylaws. I had noted on various occasions that they were not as clear as they should be, and that they were outmoded in a number of different ways. As I've read through the materials, I'm happy that it's been divided into 2 groups. I think the group of changes, which you've labeled as non-controversial or easy, are things that we can and should consider relatively quickly. In terms of the other changes, which are more substantive, I'd like to know whether there will be a process for sorting through these things, whether the mayor wants to create an ad hoc governance committee that could sort through these things and have some discussions of the more controversial or more significant ones, or whether the council as a whole would like to have a special meeting devoted to this so that we could have a plenary session discussion of these things. So I think, I'm happy to look at these for this first group of the non-controversial ones and even vote on them at the next session. But we also need to have a process for dealing with the more significant changes.
Thank you. Other comments? Yes, Councilman R. and then Mayor White.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with all of those points. I think that governance committee, a rules committee, some mechanism for considering kind of change over time so as to kind of put some focused attention, but several minds kind of digging in, entertaining requests from the full council, I think is a good idea. I mentioned it to some of you independently. I also think that I think there's some value in, we've discussed a little bit the prospect of a special meeting or a off-site activity as we are kind of in the waning months of this configuration of the board, or at least leading into the election, taking the benefit of these 2 years of experience, capturing what has been working and what hasn't, and looking at our governance documents with an eye toward some of those larger foundational questions, not letting the language drive the decisions, but kind of coming to some agreement on some of the decisions on the weightier questions, and then finding the right language to reflect our kind of shared perspective on those things would be a good idea. And I'd encourage it sooner rather than later. We've talked about perhaps early January getting a group together to at least start capturing the combined experience and knowledge of this group, maybe a half day or something like that, a dedicated chunk of time where we're all together thinking through some of these bigger questions rather than peeling them off one at a time as we've been doing for the last several months.
Mayor White?
Because these bylaws are so critical to Friendship Heights, I'm of the mindset that the entire council should have a chance to weigh in on any changes, any discussion, rather than a committee. I don't think a committee really works. So I would be in favor of setting up possibly 2 meetings of the full council in January, early February, to discuss just the bylaws themselves.
Is that a motion? Or do you need a motion, or
I don't
is that
think
just sort of a consensus, trying to figure out
I
what's going on
would think
here?
it's a consensus.
Yeah, any
type
further
thing.
discussion? I mean, we're just in discussion now. Not-
I just have a question for Mayor. Are you, would this be a public meeting or just
Yes.
a council? Okay.
Yes,
It has to be public.
I think this has to be done in public. Yeah.
Okay.
Council Member Salt?
I agree with almost all the comments I've heard, and I agree with having, I guess we would call them work sessions to talk about this. I would hope it would be collaborative, like you said, and include all council members. But I think we need to ask a bigger question, which is, and this is something like facing every government in the United States, how to govern well, how to get the support and respect of the residents. I think we need to ask the bigger question of what is our governing philosophy? What are our responsibilities, and who is what are the roles and responsibilities that we're allocating to that, and how do we want to conduct meetings? How do we want to have outreach to enhance community engagement? And only after we discuss that should we talk about changes in governing documents. The documents should reflect how we want to govern, not just, I don't think we should just make changes without thinking of the broader question of what we're here for.
So I'd leave it to the mayor, and I think we can leave it to the mayor to, go ahead, Council Member Tyler.
I think we have a couple of things on the table. I understand the comments of stating, one, we need to understand the community and our residents and what is important. And then there is looking at the bylaws and sitting down discussing them. I think, and having served as chair of several bylaw committees, it is very difficult to sit in a open meeting without, as Councilman Measy said, putting a process together as to what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. And I think just sitting here talking about a bylaw and say, okay, we're going to look at bylaw number 1, and then expect everybody to really talk and sit and figure out, I don't think you're going to get the essence of what it is to reconstruct bylaws. What are we, note-taking and then all of that? I think we need to sit and have a work session to understand the process that we're looking towards to or trying to create of how we're going to delve into this endeavor. Redoing bylaws is not an easy task. And if you just sit here like we're here right now and say, okay, look at bylaw number 1222 and let's talk about it, we're not helping ourselves this way. I think if we sit to discuss, and as Councilman Salt said, how we want to govern, that is the first step that we collectively need to hash out. How do we do this? What is it that we want to look like, not just this council, but how do we want the councils going forward to look like or potentially look like? Those are in-depth discussions that, honestly, I think would be very boring if I were sitting in the audience listening to us talk about, well, I think we should do this. Well, how about this? Does anybody else think about this? And they have no input. I think that's the cart before the horse. I think the council needs to really sit and talk to themselves to come up with some ideas, not decide, but to come up with some discussion and possibly out of that discussion come up with a process and then bring it back to the body and say, this is what we're planning or thinking about doing, and this is the process that we are going to go forward with. I think at that point, then at a meeting, then comments would come from the public to say, maybe you want to think about blah, 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 and so forth. But I think just to jump in and start doing updates on bylaws, we've shot ourselves in the foot.
Councilman Measy?
Yeah, I know. I appreciate the points that Martha and Cheryl have made. My own experience with this is that if we follow along with that, we'll have some interesting discussions and we'll have the same bylaws a year or 2 years from now, because it's very hard to reach consensus in that way. But we should have that conversation. That's fine. I return to the first point. I don't think we should, especially if that's what we're going to do, I think we should look at the first category of changes that Bobby's memo suggests, which we can handle quickly. I mean, there's no point in saying in the bylaws that we have to post things on the bulletin board at the corner of Friendship, the Heights, whatever it's called there, when there's no bulletin board there. There's no point in having reference to directors when we don't have directors. We should be able, let's at least make the effort in the next meeting or two to clean up those embarrassing things that shouldn't be in the bylaws, and then we can go to the major governance questions after that.
Mayor White? Thoughts?
I'm fine with that. Michael, do you think we can do that without a separate council meeting,
I think
focusing just on the...
Yeah, my reading of those, and
Yeah.
others may have a different view, but my reading of those is that we can do that at a regular council meeting.
I'm fine with that.
So, yes, go Council Member R and then Salt.
I agree with that, but maybe if we find out there is disagreement that it's simple, we move that into the more difficult one and just move on and
Yep.
I think we'll find
Proceed.
that out very
Okay.
quickly.
not that we're sticking with your list of what's simple.
Yes,
We-
I would.
yeah,
Yes. of
just to
course,
move
I'd-
on, yeah.
I'd be delighted to finish this off quickly, but, you know, what was simple to me may not appear simple to somebody else. That's,
As a procedural matter, reading the bylaws, in order for us to take action at our next meeting, a set of, each individual or a set of amendments need to be submitted at the preceding regular meeting. Do we need to take an action to consider 1, 6, 8, 10, 11, 14, 16, 17, 19, and 20 as submitted for the purposes of that provision, and then maybe consider individual votes or batching, subsequent batching for an action at our next regular meeting?
That sounds right to me.
Okay, so I've got Councilman Measy and then Council Members Holt.
No,
Yes,
I'm done.
okay, that's what you're proposing. Okay, so you're, okay, yeah, Council,
I would prefer that that formal submission be at the next meeting, to be very clear of which, and just isolate it to what you call the easy ones, and next time is the formal submission to start the clock. That's
Okay.
what I would prefer.
okay, does someone want to make a motion for one or the other alternative? So that we know whether we're putting on the agenda for the next meeting the simple amendments, which, as Councilman Measy has described, are out of date or portions of the bylaws, or what?
I mean, we've lived with these things for a while. I'm perfectly happy to have the first discussion of these things at the January meeting, submit them and discuss at January meeting, and then vote on them at the February meeting,
Okay.
if that's what I hear Martha saying.
Yeah, do we really need a motion, or can we
That
just
we
agree
just
to
agree.
this?
No, that's
Okay.
how
But
Okay,
what
thank
I
you.
will do is, I will put these on the agenda, the simple
Fair.
ones, for the next meeting. I just for clarity's sake, I don't want to come back to the next meeting and have somebody tell me we didn't say you should do that.
No.
It will be on the agenda
Will be
next
on-
meeting, right? Oh, yes, Councilman Schaefer.
So it's submitted at the next meeting?
That's
and
correct.
discussed at the next meeting?
And voted on. in
And voted
February.
on at
And
the
would
next
there
meeting.
be any kind of working session just on the simple ones?
No.
No,
Okay.
okay. Does everybody
Well,
understand?
we take those one at a time.
Right.
We
Yes.
don't, okay.
Everybody understand what we're doing at the next meeting with these?
Yeah, and I would
Yeah.
just ask that between now and the next meeting, we come to some, everyone, if you think one of these items is not appropriate for presentation, or there are items that are not as complex as we thought they were, that we have an operative list of amendments for January.
Yeah, why don't you let me know
Yeah.
ahead of time so that the appropriate materials can be produced, and I don't hear about it the first time at the next meeting.
Exactly.
Thank you very much. Okay, that is the last item on the agenda.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
I do have one other thing, and I apologize for not having raised it earlier when Cheryl gave the public safety report, because I had it in my mind.
use your mic,
I am
or come up closer.
Trying. I know that we've temporarily suspended the police patrol until we get information about the insurance requirements that Julian is pursuing. When he finds out what that's about and how much it would cost us in terms of insurance or other costs, will that come back to the council before the police patrol is reinstated, or is we just going to go ahead and pay whatever has to be paid to reinstate the police patrol without a discussion of those extra expenses?
Julian?
My feeling is if the information comes back that it's more appropriate for us to hire the police directly, then that would need to come back to the council, because that fundamentally changes
Right.
the program.
Right.
It becomes a
Clearly,
direct hire with all the ramifications as opposed to contractor. If the contracted route is still viable and it just involves an extra expense for an insurance policy, then it sort of depends on the cost involved
Well,
and whether that would
that's my
come back.
concern. If we're talking about a $1,000 insurance policy, which I can't imagine that's the case, that's easy. If we're talking about a $10,000 liability insurance policy, I think that's something that the council has to consider. Does that seem reasonable? Yeah. Okay, that's all I wanted to clarify.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? If not, entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay, who moved? You. Me? Okay. Thank you. We are adjourned at 9:50 p.m. Thank you all very much.